Welcome to Workday Rising. We're broadcasting live today for the very first time from Workday Rising, and we're going to talk about the changing world of HR. So thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Katie Coletto. I lead the product marketing organization for the talent optimization side of Workday, and I am joined here by some amazing experts on the changing world of HR. So let me go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves. Evan?
Well, hi everybody. Good to be with you. My name is Evan Metter. I'm a partner at KPMG. I'm focused on human capital advisory and HR transformation.
Excellent. Mike?
Hi everyone. I'm Mike Stanback. I am part of the Workday's product marketing organization, and my focus is around machine learning.
Cool. Hey there, my name is Bjorn Hamill, and I'm the Chief Security Architect at Workday, and for the last 2 years I've been the technical lead for the new Workday Credentials product that we announced today.
Excellent.
And last, I'm Allie Fuller. I lead our People Experience initiative here at Workday, and we're going to dive a little bit into employee experience later, so excited to talk to you guys about that.
Absolutely, and I think we have two people at least at this table who are breathing a big sigh of relief today with two big products that we announced. They've been working really hard toward that.
Congratulations.
So congratulations on a great launch. And so I think as we've heard this morning already, and if you've tuned into the keynote, we've heard some big takeaways, some big trends that are happening. We're hearing about the employee experience being very, very important. We're hearing about the trends around data being important. Skills seems to be everywhere.
We have lots of them.
We have lots of them. We're hearing lots about them. So insights and also talent mobility around talent marketplaces and things like that. So I'd love to open it up to the team and hear about what trends you are hearing the most about, what you think are the most important trends facing our HR colleagues today.
So one of the things that I have a conversation with every CHRO, every HR leadership team, it revolves around some basic pillars, right, of changes. Certainly employee experience, right? What are the expectations? What's being delivered? How do we close the gap? And that employee experience isn't only the digital experience, it's the social experience at work, it's the environmental experience. I work with an HR group that rebranded itself as Employee Experience, and it brought in real estate, the real estate function, because the environment is part of the experience. It's not just the digital experience. That's number one. Analytics is huge, right? What's worth measuring? How do we use it? How do we avoid being creepy about it, right, is a big piece of it. Workforce shaping, so moving away from workforce planning, which we do a couple times a year, and really thinking about the changing nature of skills, the changing workforce. How does intelligent automation impact what skills we will need and closing that gap? So really thinking about workforce shaping is very different. And then culture, right? Culture, what's HR's role to play in shaping the culture? And underneath all of that, what's the organization that HR needs? So how is the service delivery model? Right? What are the new roles? What are the new skill sets within that function? And what are the enabling technologies, right? Which is your sweet spot.
Exactly.
All of those things, every conversation I have, those are the major trends. And it's all related.
Sounds like we're going to need a few more days at Rising to
Yeah,
talk
I
through
think
all of
so.
it. Any other trends that weren't covered that you guys are seeing when you're talking to our customers?
Well, I think you guys heard a little bit about it in terms of the keynote, which is the employee experience piece, and I love that you touched on it. It's not just the digital experience. Employees are really in the driver's seat these days,
Right.
and they, between the gig economy and all these other things, they're really raising the bar in terms of the expectations that we have with technology in the workplace and all these things, and really the workplace experience today, and I say workplace experience because it's not just technology, it's everything, is falling short for the user, and ultimately they don't feel productive, and it doesn't enable them to essentially do their best work. And so what you heard with the people experience and even other initiatives in terms of openness of our technology now is recognizing that our users are inundated with so many tools, technologies, whether personal or work, that come together in this experience, and where Workday can make that seamless and reduce that friction and integrate those tools and technology, quite frankly, into an experience that users don't need to know where to go to find something or how to leverage the technology. That's where we'll be successful with an employee experience.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure,
Am I
you can
allowed
answer.
to- am I allowed to do that?
Absolutely. I don't have to ask all the questions here.
You didn't tell me you were going to do that.
I didn't know I was going to do that. So when you talk about employee experience, I know Allie is taking it more from tools and technology and all these things that they need to be able to work with. But as an employee myself, I feel like part of my experience is my career journey.
Sure.
And do you consider that part of the employee experience when you're talking about this as a big trend, or is that something separate?
No, absolutely. I mean, think about it as, so one, I'm going to share some data throughout our conversation. This
like
hasn't
data.
even been published yet, so this is really the first
right,
time. This is
breaking
kind of
news.
a unique. We've been doing a survey for 22 years called the HR Transformation Survey. It's global. This year we had over 1,300 organizations participate, 55 different countries across 31 industries. So it is very, very broad. And we're really, it's the longest longitudinal survey of its kind that is in the industry. One of the things that we're looking at around employee experience, we have some key value drivers. So we're able to see who are the pioneers in HR and who are some of the followers, the fast followers, the laggards, etc. That pioneering group's about 10% of the population. 61% of the pioneers that respond say that design thinking is a top skill for HR. That's different than it has been in the last 20 years. That was not even on the radar.
I was going to say, was that even
Not
come
even
up?
on the radar, and that's now come up to where 61% think. The other one is 95%, if you're a pioneer or not, believe that employee experience is a key priority. So that's a huge piece. And when you're asking, is the career, that design thinking skill set, looking at the moments that matter, right? We know that there's a journey, there's a customer journey, and a lot of the skills that we have from looking at the customer experience, we're applying to the employee experience. How do you find the organization? What is your onboarding like? How do you move through that first 3 years? That onboarding experience usually is where it bottoms out for a lot of organizations. The first 3 years, your career is moving, and then things get harder, right? And so it bottoms out again. But it's all throughout the life cycle, where you move to, how you grow and develop, and then when you exit and become an alumnus of the organization. That's the whole journey. So every part of that matters. I would say in our research, they don't all matter equally, right? And they don't all, right now, exist at a point that's congruent with expectations.
Interesting.
And I think the points that you bring up, like those moments of onboarding and exiting the company, are another space where credentials can play in as well. Of being able to capture those experiences of what you bring with you and what you're taking with you. Because right now it sort of ends up locked away with the employer. And if we can unlock it and give it to an individual, I think that's where we can actually transform and meet that trend and create a better experience.
I think your hypothesis around the portability of skills and the so we talked about AI a little bit, machine learning and AI. I was with a healthcare organization 2 weeks ago who was really concerned about, are there going to be jobs? Like, is it going to eat away jobs? Are all jobs
Robot nurses?
Well, I mean, but a lot of back office, I think, first. And what we're finding through our research is jobs aren't necessarily going away, but they're becoming atomized. So parts of people's jobs are leaving. So it's it's an opportunity if you're an organization that wants to maximize utilization and capacity and efficiency. How do you fill those gaps? How do you retrain, et cetera? Opportunity for HR, right? And then when you have a skill set, how is that portable and useful in terms of not just these career ladders, but across organizations and et cetera?
Well, and I think Mike can touch on this a little bit more too in terms of machine learning, but I think Workday's stance on machine learning is unique in that you hear that word all the time between AI and machine learning. And for Workday, it's really about enabling and augmenting the user, not replacing them. So you touched on it earlier with employee experience. I thought it was interesting is the burden that HR carries from things like users not being able to self-serve, for people not being able to get answers to simple questions without having to open a ticket, case avoidance, leads to HR bearing a burden of having to walk those people through those different steps in their journeys or different critical times in their career, versus what we can do with machine learning is augment the user so they have all that at their fingertips and allow HR to focus on the actual design thinking that you talked about and all these other strategic things that they should be focused on. And I don't know if you want to touch a little bit more on the machine learning side, because I think it helps with the user productivity too.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. From the machine learning perspective, Workday's unique stance is that we are not trying to replace, and there's a lot of concern out there, is my job going to exist?
A robot's going to do my job.
Robot, and
right?
that's actually why we don't use the term AI, is because the term AI brings about this picture of little robots.
Right.
And so we are specifically focused around machine learning and leveraging this plethora of data that we now have at our fingertips within your organization. You own all this data, and now we can use machine learning to apply to that data to help provide more data-driven insights that help people make better decisions, and can help them along on this journey that you're talking about.
Right.
Because if you think of everything, what's the core currency for HR these days? It's skills.
Yeah.
When you're recruiting someone, you're recruiting skills. When you're evolving or progressing in your career, it's all about learning new skills. Even now with machine learning being introduced, and you're saying you have to reskill people. What are those skills that we have to reskill? So everything around this notion of skills allows us to apply these algorithms to help drive forward the organization in where they should make those investments.
You know, there's another virtue. I don't want to sneak in there on skills. No, but I think this is really important, and I think you guys this is gonna resonate with you in our audience. This idea of skills and portability and what you want to do, super important. There's another virtue. We worked with an insurance company last year to look at the work and look at the skills and start thinking about, well, what are the technical, behavioral, leadership skills, competencies, right? And using Workday, which is a Workday client, right? So they're going to love what you guys are putting out here. But what they found was the way people found an organization, the job descriptions were written 10 years ago, had never been updated, and really terribly had an unconscious bias around, they had things written in them that were not the job anymore. They were written in language that wasn't really around the skills, and it was about degrees and et cetera. And we all know the research around women and men, right, and how they read job descriptions. And if a job description is written, so this skilled concept and moving to this, what I call a new currency, not only is it great for career development, it's also great for creating a fairer, more equitable space around what does it really take to do this job, and starting to weed out unconscious bias when we talk about what's needed for the job. And I think that's critically important for employers to have integrity and to be able to get the best worker for the right work, right?
And so I think along that, that's one area where I guess employees see the impact of machine learning bubbling up, because I feel like so often we think about this machine learning and AI providing extra tools for the administration to move the chess pieces around. But what are other areas where machine learning really bubbles up to that employee, to the employee experience?
To me, I think it's funny you say that. I actually think where machine learning is successful or thrives is when the user doesn't notice it. So what's really interesting in the case of people experience, I can give you one example, is we surface top tasks or suggested tasks to the user at the very top when they log in. And these are things that they perform most frequently or things that they do from a temporal aspect, let's say every Friday or every month. The user, they have access to those things in Workday elsewhere, but they're having to go find them today. Machine learning just makes that frictionless and drives them to be more productive. So it's really about producing insights and driving them to productivity in terms of leveraging machine learning, where, to be honest,
much more personal,
it's not about the tools and technology. It's actually about putting the person at the center and really making it so the user doesn't need to know that that's happening under the curtains. It's just like Netflix. Great customer too. Netflix, you log in, Netflix is very different than yours, and you don't think twice about it. It's just because it's personalized and meets you where you are, and so you go on your merry way.
It's that everyday magic. Like, people want quiet simplicity, everyday magic, right? in their tools. And we work with a large organization in New York City. They had human beings taking triaging requests and getting them to the right assignment groups, getting to the right groups, to deal with. And this is like a huge organization, really scalable. Well, we found that we could write natural language processing and machine learning to be able to triage those and answer some of them right off the bat. Now, that's a better experience for the employees, right? Getting answers faster. It's more efficient, so putting the muscles within HR where they're really valuable versus having, it's 12 people essentially doing this for. That is the power of these things. Embracing them as opportunities to get a leg up, to focus on workforce shaping or employee experience, and letting those things go to machine learning and being grateful, right?
I like the gratitude idea toward machine learning.
Well, I mean, who wants to triage cases coming in, right?
Exactly.
And it's really, if you go back to it, it's just taking what machines are good at and leaving what people are good at for the people to do. So there are things that machine learning doesn't excel at because they're not patterns or things we've seen before, and that's where humans excel, right? So they actually take a front seat and make that decision that's more strategic and has more thinking.
Look at this
remove the drudgery of those.
This beautiful event, right? This design, this experience.
They can't see it.
Right? You
need to
can't see
remember,
it,
they're just looking
but
at
it is
us.
fantastic.
It's beautiful.
But a machine can't do that. That's what you're curating a environmental experience, right?
And I echo what you said there. Is from a machine learning perspective, the machines are very good at taking large amounts of data and finding patterns in that data. What they're not good at is applying judgment to that. And an example that we always use, which is not related to HR, but is think about Waze or Google Maps. There's not a day that I don't leave the house and I turn on Google Maps, even if I know where I'm going. because traffic patterns change, right? But let's say you're going down, what's the major freeway? I'm from Colorado, so California 101.
101.
You're going down 101.
Sorry
You're
for
in
those
the
from Florida. You're in California.
You're
We
in
don't know the roads
the
here yet.
far left lane, right? And Maps comes on and says, we found you a faster route that's 10 minutes faster. Exit the next exit. You have to cross 5 lanes of traffic and you have to get on a road that you know has traffic lights on it. And so your judgment call may be, I don't want to do that because the 10 minutes is not worth it to me.
That's right.
And that's not something a machine can do. It's something, and that, and it comes to the same thing with hiring decisions and talent decisions. If you have an employee that you're managing and it's come time for them to have a promotion or move to another step in their career, the machine may say 90% of the people that are in this role with this background have gone on to this particular role. But you as a manager have spoken to that employee and you know that maybe they're not one of those 90%. Maybe they're in the minority and they actually want to go do something else.
That's right.
That's not something a machine can determine, and that's why you can never remove the human element out of this.
Can I connect something to what you're saying around the human element? Because what you brought up is so important. You talked about the manager, right? We've seen managers get more information, better insights, more data in their pocket, right, on their mobile devices, and lots of Workday customers are loving that, right? But if you think about, we study this, and we have a huge part of our group that focuses on manager effectiveness. And in the conversations I'm having with HR leaders, CHROs, the conversation around we need to move our managers from what we expected them 20 years ago. When you look at the manager, what was it supposed to do 20 years
Huge
ago?
difference.
It was no Microsoft products,
Right.
manage large, global teams, etc. Now that's different. Now we're asking people to manage a workforce that has part AI, part human. Manage a gig economy, right, workforce, and that the skill set to be a manager, and I think we've all, in a way, missed this whole big concept, which is being a manager is hard. It's a real job. It takes real skill.
I don't tell my employees that.
Right? Just giving you the data does not a good manager make.
Right.
And so that's another area we talk about. You asked about the priorities of HR.
Right.
Actually creating a culture and a skill set within the manager class around how do you use all this great stuff that's coming to you with empathy, with curiosity, creating a narrative, right? Really making change leaders out of the managers. This is the next horizon for a lot of organizations.
That's interesting. And speaking of managers, I think managers have historically taken on the burden of culture. And at least within their teams, and I'd be interested to hear from you how all of this data is impacting kind of that softer side of an organization that we know of as culture.
Yeah. So I was at Cornell University last week, right, doing fall recruiting, and the question that I got most frequently was not about the work at KPMG or the hours, etc. It was the culture.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about the culture. It is, we devote so much of our lives to being at work and working, that being in a culture where you're growing, being in a culture where you're invested in, and we all know that the idea of the social contract of lifelong employment, that's no one's expectation anymore.
Yeah.
These folks at Cornell don't expect to come to KPMG and retire.
All the employees at Workday are like,
all of them are, to date.
Absolutely.
It must be a culture thing.
But so I think the idea of how are you going to develop me and how are you going to grow me is a real part of the value proposition. It's not soft in the way we think about pay and benefits and those kind of, but it's actually not soft. It's a real determining factor on is the best talent coming into your organization and staying there or not. And I think that's why you see this emphasis. We also sadly see in the industry what happens when culture fails, right? And the loss of trust that can create.
And I would even say it's a full-time job to maintain that culture. So Workday is a good example of this, where you're growing quickly, right? Which is a great thing, but you need to make sure that you maintain that culture intentionally when you hire people, when they onboard, when they go throughout their journey, and they can contribute to that as a team. And we do something interesting in Workday. Our talent organization does this, and it's wonderful, is we do the best Workday place or best workplace surveys, It comes out every Friday. It's 2 questions. You get on your mobile device really quick, takes less than a minute, and it keeps a pulse on our culture from both management and leadership to culture, fun, all these things. And we look at it and we take it very seriously as a leadership team. And we revisit it at goals, year end, at quarters. And it's just a way to make sure with intentionality that you're not just starting a culture, but you're investing in it continuously. And a culture might evolve too, right? That's the other thing. That's okay. But it can't be something that you statically draw a line in the sand at some point.
So you talk about how do you measure it, and there's some interesting data. I won't torch you with it, but in our survey that will be released, folks can see the data around how do we actually measure culture, and with the move from engagement surveys to pulse surveys, like the different actual interventions that organizations are now adopting to start to measure these things and keep tabs on it, to your point.
Yeah, that's what I think is really interesting, is it is that applying data and eventually machine learning and deeper data to what we've always thought is more of a soft skill is culture.
You touched on something that I thought was interesting, which is the expectation is that somebody's not staying at one company for their entire work life, and I totally agree with you, but I think that's what makes credentialing so compelling, because we're now making the assumption that the user, not only that stays with them, but they're going to change companies. And so if you can attach that to them, then it makes that concept so frictionless in some ways.
And their time with you is around how are you growing me and how are you developing me. It's one of the reasons why, for us, for instance, just to turn the mirror on ourselves, we've invested millions of dollars to build a state-of-the-art learning facility here in Orlando for KPMG, right? It's called the Lake House. It's a big investment, but it's because our professional services teams, our professionals, will stay with us as long as they're being developed and thought of, and it's curated back to experience, right? Not just the digital environment, but the environmental, the social, and that's where we see organizations really going in terms of the emphasis now on learning, right?
And then you're taking that, like, I know, Allie, you mentioned credentials. Do you want to explain what credentials is? I feel like that's a really new concept that I didn't know about until a couple months ago.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So really, the core concept in the credential platform is being able to take data that organizations are authoritative for already today, and then be able to stamp it in such a way that it can become trusted and traceable over time. And so that I can...
So those Cornell graduates who are going to KPMG, and any of your other graduates who want a great job, apply to KPMG. How would they use credentials?
Yeah, so imagine that when someone onboards into an organization, if they're using the credential platform, that initial act of just signing on and joining could actually create a credential. It's basically the start of their work record. Could say, you now are officially employed here. I, as the employer, am authoritative for that. And what's really different about credentials is the individual who's getting that data. It's really shifting the privacy model where the individual is now in control of their data, as opposed to the employer just keeping it in a database somewhere for their own means. And it's really a win-win in this case. The individual gets some additional skills that they can share, and the employer gets that better experience as well. On the flip side, when people show up with credentials.
So then when that Cornell graduate who's going on to their next job after 15 years at KPMG doesn't have to think through, like, oh, what are all the jobs I've had?
Exactly.
Because that's stored somewhere.
Yep, it's stored with them. They take that record with them in the form of a credential in the Way To application.
There's a really important confluence with what you're creating here around the standard, right, that was going to drive across your client base and the industry, but also the work. So when people come to us and ask us, what are the skills we need, and how is the skills changing, especially with the AI conversation, it's how's the work changing, right? How's the work changing first in terms of what the skills need? We talked about atomization, but so I'll give you an example. And here's where HR, I think, needs to improve and where they're focused on. Back to your original question around trends in HR. Knowing the business and knowing the work. So we have a tool at KPMG, we call it EVA, and it's around the insurance roles. And so we all know that insurance is changing. Look at those insurance roles, the underwriters, the actuaries. Being able to understand how AI coming online is going to change those roles slightly, and what's the underwriter of the future, right? That's not something that HR can be hands off with. They need to understand how is the business changing in order to link that back to what are the skill sets for the underwriter of the future. And so really getting that level deeper, it used to, 10 years ago, we used to talk about business acumen, right? But what business acumen now is understanding the work to where you understand what's changing the work, and then you can relate it back to the skills, and that is I think the sweet spot.
So, and then in credentials, so there's not only the credentials of what you can do today, and I could think insurance or nursing are great examples, right?
Absolutely.
Areas where people regularly need to verify their credentials,
Absolutely.
and employers need to verify
That's right.
to have people on the floor, on the phones.
Yeah, in particular in the nursing case, it's an incredibly long time period between when you show up and when you can actually start work. Because that verification process of all the paper, certificates that have been issued, and different certifying bodies takes calendar time, like a month of background checking before someone can start work. So if we can change that around and make it all digital and seamless and transparent, it will really change time to productivity.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're doing too, because the trend of the gig economy and being able to bring in reliably workers right into your organization that you don't have that long history with.
Exactly.
Right?
And
They're
how
going
do
to
you-
work. So I think it seems like it's a really important moment in terms of making that gig economy work more reliably for organizations. But organizations in turn need to shift their thinking from you are your job code to you are a collection of skills, which when I talk about it with our clients, it's a total change in currency.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? To where you're not counting people in job codes, you're saying, what's the skill base?
Well, and the flip side of that gig economy use case is that it's helping the individual as well. Because all of those different experiences they're having, they're able to accumulate in one place now and more easily build this trusted profile of these are the things I've done.
Right.
Maybe it qualifies me for more things more clearly now.
So it sounds like it really reduces the barriers of movement and talent mobility.
But it is a momentous change. I think that
Yeah.
you're kind of saying it as a feature. But what I really feel like we're at this moment is this is a pivotal moment for how people relate to work and tying the things around culture and managers back together. A manager has to understand how you don't get from analyst 2 to analyst 3. Right? That's not the conversation. That's a lazy conversation based on a 20th century idea of job codes. Right?
Yeah.
What do they really have to have a conversation about? Here's what's needed by our organization in the future. Here's what you have. Here's what you don't. Having the skills. They need tools like yours, and they need capabilities in the manager class and HR to facilitate that. So it's not just a technology solution. It's a culture solution, it's an HR capability solution, and it's a manager solution.
Yep.
I will say, I think there's also a piece there you touched on, the culture shift. I think there is something that people need to be intentional about in terms of being open and meeting users where they are. If you look, even when Workday started, it was all about having people come into Workday, and that's extremely powerful. And there are reasons why you would, right, when you're doing some of these transactions. But there are also reasons why you shouldn't leave your natural workspace. So you should be in a Slack, a Microsoft Teams, any of those tools that you use in your day-to-day. And because you have access to Workday and you're authenticated, you have the ability to do those things there. And that's something that culturally our customers also need to be intentional about, because traditionally I think it's been about pushing somebody to come into something, and it's really actually about the opposite, which is pushing Workday out to them. And I think that's something that customers are really starting to get excited about too.
Well, and it sounds like it really increases productivity if you're surfacing just, again, the relevant information, the timely information. Hey, you're a manager, did you know you should maybe think about this with your employee or with your gig worker? You thought, a lot of that information, it sounds like, can surface to them right where they happen.
So back to your manager persona, which I always love the managers, because it's this mix between so many different things.
It is.
Our average customer will supply their managers with upwards of 100 different applications that they use throughout their workday to manage their team or their own work. So that, and I won't share the terrifying numbers of how high those numbers get. But what's really terrifying about that, you're the manager, you're inundated, and switching between those disparate applications just drains your efficiency, and ultimately what we hear from them is critical information gets lost in the noise, and so you can't even distill signal from noise when it comes to your team, let alone manage them, right? So you've got 20 employees, you're trying to do the best you can, but you're showered with data, with information, with tools and
compliance
technology.
issues. I mean, it's hard to be a manager, and I think that's why in an age where so much is now we're exploiting technology, and I think the conversation I'm having with HR leaders and HR leadership teams is around how does the HR of the future need to look? And here's a data point that we haven't released publicly yet, but I'll share with you and our audience here.
I think we're releasing public.
I was going to
right
say,
now,
secret's out.
Here it is. So that pioneer group of HR teams, 76% of those pioneers see it as HR's role to challenge the service delivery model, not just for HR, but for the organization. And so talk about that relationship now with leaders and managers
Yeah.
to talk about getting into the work, right? I talk a lot about HR as the patient, but also HR as the physician. HR, so 2 weeks ago, I was in New York in our innovation lab with a group that had come in with an HR as the patient mentality, right? All the things you're talking about. How do we use Workday to a greater extent? How do we use AI and machine learning? How do we move services from the line, from our generalists and business partners into a shared services center? Really looking at all the tools and levers, service delivery model, technology, on how do we transform HR? And then what are the new roles that we don't have the oxygen for because we're answering questions, right? We're doing all these things that we should be exploiting technology. We should be leveraging technology. Fascinating conversation, and more we see HR organizations both seeing themselves as the patient for some of these things, skills, new roles, service delivery model, but then also as the physician for the rest of the organization. So I think it's really important HR goes first. If HR is going to be successful to help the organization, you got to go first.
Well, so it's interesting, we haven't talked about HR's role in machine learning or any of the products we're talking about. And I think what's fun about what you saw in terms of the announcements like case management solution is stuff like machine learning is being woven into that experience. So you're a case solver, you're managing HR cases, and you want to help your employees faster. Why can't you respond with a video? So your employees receive a video on how to do that. Why can't you respond with a pre-prescripted task, a knowledge-based article that we recommend you create because we've had 5 cases come in about the same question. So machine learning isn't just about the employee or the manager. It actually is about removing that friction and drudgery for every single persona, and HR is absolutely one of them in terms of making them efficient.
I love that. That's definitely that mix, and it goes to another data point we have around, I talked about learning, and in our learning facility, there is absolutely a place in the value proposition for those kind of in-depth, deep learnings. There's also a place for in the line of work, like through the workday, no pun intended, around delivering learning, like real time as you need it, right? Those micro bits, that's part of it, right? You're not just answering a question, you're delivering learning, and that's a very powerful trend.
When we talked to folks actually in user research, the number one thing that stood out to them on the people experience Workday today, so the experience you're first graded with, is there was a video of the day. And it was no longer than 3 to 5 minutes. And when it was longer, they wouldn't click on it, by the way. And they loved the idea because it was a fun fact that they could digest on their work, way to work, whatever that was. But at some level, they just couldn't take in all this information if it was anything more than that. And so how do you make these digestible, engaging chunks
and great
that
way
then
to
make them want to learn?
Yeah, great way to support culture or learning or even compliance if that in these little bits of information.
That's right.
And I wanted to go back to I like your analogy of HR as the physician and the patient. I've never heard that before. I think it's new, and I'm like, you see my brain trying to wrap around it. So if I'm an HR as a physician, what's in my med school? What do I need to learn about today? What technologies do I need to be really expert in as I go forward and try to drive the health, to build on your analogy, the health of the organization going forward?
So you guys would be really happy to know, I'm going to link a couple things. What you talked about, Bjorn, is skill sets. We've looked at the work that HR needs to do and the skill sets up to the role. So we've done that work around what are the competencies and et cetera. And I'll share with you a couple of the HR roles that we're seeing both in our pioneer group, but also as we're building new HR organizations. One is the employee experience architect, right? So being able to actually get in and look at that to a dedicated role. I talked about the role around culture, right? So the culture incubator, the cultural architect. Data scientist, I had so our pioneers are 2x likely to invest in data scientist roles in HR than their laggards, right? Than the others. So that's what distinguishes you as a pioneer. Workforce shaper, right? I talked about understanding the work and not just doing a lazy 20th century version of workforce planning, but actually workforce shaping. That workforce shaper role is a new role, right? So these are just a smattering, a little bit of a teaser of the new roles that HR needs to do. But that is the master class. It's analytics, it's experience, it's culture, it's workforce shaping, and maybe if I had to throw another one, it's that robotics engineer. Right? So if you're going to see more robotics even within the HR function, that operations group is going to be responsible for the HRIS, right? But also for the other tools that are cooperating with the HRIS and being able to robotics capability manager, right? So these are some of the roles, and they're not science fiction. Like these are roles that are existing in our pioneer group today that are really for those who are looking to say, how do we change?
These are the ones.
These are the roles that you need to build, and to do so, you need to free up capacity by leveraging great technology and proven service delivery models.
Exactly.
I
And
think
any other-
I was going to say, you touched on the word, so the actual analytics piece of that, and I think I would expand it even one step further, which is understanding how your users are leveraging tools and technology. And so it's a combination of analytics and user research, which is qualitative and quantitative, right? And at the end of the day, if you don't know what your users are or are not doing, you can't make that compelling experience. So we have this in people experience. You could do the most wonderful configuration in your tenant as a Workday customer, and Workday could deliver all the most rich and powerful features, but your users might not be using it the way that you intended. And if you're not understanding how they're using it, again, both qualitatively and quantitatively, how do you make the best business decisions or even tweaks to how you're configuring something, and that evolves. So a knowledge-based article is a great example. That's a static document if you don't continue to evolve it. So the ability to know what pieces are they interacting with, what are people searching for? Is that in the bottom of the article? Could we bring that up? All these things connect a full circle so that our customers can be empowered with information to continuously make that experience better.
And then vocabulary test. So in med
Okay,
school, we have
here
a
we go.
vocabulary test, and you have to define things. What is on the vocabulary test for our new HR physician? Mike, anything?
I'm not sure I'd be the best to answer that one.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I think they need to understand. Like, I think machine learning and AI.
Definitely.
I mean, we're talking so much about them.
Well, I
People
think-
really understand what they mean and what
Well,
the
but
implications are.
I mean, I struggle with this one, and I cover machine learning.
Yeah.
So I struggle with how much does someone really need to know about machine learning, and should they need to know? Should the everyday user, should the everyday employee need to know about machine learning, or even an HR administrator?
Okay.
It should be seamless, right? We're baking machine learning into the core of Workday. And so there are things getting surfaced, like skills insights, for example. Now you can get a view of the skills you have, the skills you need, and there's your gap, right? There's your analysis of here's where we need to hire, or here's where we need to retrain the workforce. Does it matter that machine learning is the one that's delivering that?
Good. All right. So
Right.
we're
I had a
axing that
fascinating
off.
conversation
I like skills on there.
with a group of HR leaders, and they were talking about becoming an agile organization, right? And we talked at length around how agile and agile methodology for development and agile organizations, it's become very, very blurry and it's often misused. So I think first, get right about your vocabulary around agile, right? And are you actually working in a agile way, or are you trying to be nimble, or some other kind of word like that? And you understand what that means. I was in Washington, D.C. with a financial services organization a few months ago, and they talked about, we want to be agile in terms of, I think what they meant was being nimble and being able to trade and being able to move quickly to develop stuff. We don't want to wait years to develop.
Sure.
At the same time, our finance function isn't agile. We approve our projects once a year, and that's it, and then you have to wait till next budgeting cycle. And so I think you asked a question before we started around examples of culture, and that's a culture of all CEOs want the organizations to be more innovative, take more risks. We have the data on this, right? But what does it mean in terms of changing the behavior and the structures in the organization to things like finance, agile finance, right? So we see this all as connected as KPMG. We talked a lot about HR, but there's this concept of a connected enterprise, right? Which is you need to be thoughtful about the skills, the way the work is changing, the way things are financed, right? And that takes real interoperability and connection between the front office, the middle office, and the back office. And so our point of view strongly is this idea of connected enterprise and being able to think about these things as being, I would say, put that in your vocabulary.
Another
right?
term.
So I like that one, and we haven't touched on it yet, but if you think about, typically people are talking about solving this problem of inundation of tools and technologies and employee experience with HR. So if you look at even some of our competitors' naming of their product areas, the people experience is not HR specific. The goal is to actually weave together these experiences across HR, finance, and even student. And so all the tools and frameworks and user experiences you saw today are agnostic to HR.
And IT.
Because it shouldn't matter. So in IT,
Right,
so
like onboarding, right?
Journeys is
Give
a
me my
perfect
computer.
example.
Where's my desk? Like all those pieces. That's a key
You've got
piece.
financial processes, all these things that happen throughout the year that are a financial journey. Financials users, recruiters, end users, students all need these things at pivotal points in their career or their life cycle and all of that. And nobody's talking about it across those areas. And I think that's what's so compelling about our offering is we're here to help you at each step of the way, regardless of your business function.
And what's
But
exciting?
going,
Yeah.
but
Go
going back
ahead.
to
I
the
would just-
terminology, sorry, Boyd.
Oh,
Going back to the terminology
Really incited
question
some.
that you're talking about is you were talking about agility. And okay, so going back to what you said about machine learning and AI, machine learning is a means to the end of that agility, right? You want to make your organization more agile.
that.
Machine learning can help you get there.
Right.
So at what depth does HR need to know about the terminology of machine learning?
Right.
Are they more interested in the agile piece of it, the outcome?
I
than
think
the
our
means?
perspective is, what is the utility, right? Understanding how it works, but also understanding what are the use cases. So back to our innovation lab. So with this innovation lab, and we weren't getting into the nitty gritty of what the technology. We're saying, what is like this? You already do this triage for the incoming cases, like I talked about before.
Yeah.
What else is like this in HR? Forget the technology. Look for the use cases that we can use these tools. Think about them as tools in your toolbox,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. And then also what you have done, and I think what we have done, is create a foundation where our clients and your customers don't need to start with a blank sheet of paper anymore, right? You have a perspective on portability of skills, right? We have a perspective on service delivery model and business processes. We call it powered enterprise. Together, I think if you're just getting into this game, don't start from scratch. I think that's it. It's like leverage the thoughts that thought leaders in the industry have done, thinking about
Yeah.
what others have done successfully, so you can go further. Which I would be my recommendation for everybody who's getting on this path.
And I was going to say, I don't know if you hear, do you ever, when talking to customers about credentialing, do they link that in terms of our customer community? Like there being power in our literal Workday community and having something like credentialing where you can
Absolutely.
share that skills
Right.
ecosystem.
Because the first question that comes up in the credential context is, great, if I have this currency, what can I do with it? Right? If I have skill currency and I can't spend it anywhere, then it's meaningless.
Right.
And conversely, if a bunch of apps show up that want skills, but there's no one to produce them, how do we bootstrap that? And because Workday has this relationship with over 2,500
Yeah.
customers today and over 39 million workers, that's sort of the immediate ability to like credential a big, meaningful set of people. To
So
actually build
credentials is
products
on the
top of
list.
that.
Words.
Yeah, and to my
and
point, I think credentials more than blockchain, right? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
people get
Yeah.
hung up in the hype, like, oh, blockchain, but really it's just a means to an end. It's an underlying
Yeah.
technology, and you could actually deliver a credentialing solution without a blockchain. Now, that might be heretical to say, but like, it's possible. The real core idea is that you have all the plumbing in place to be able to create credentials and then move them to a system. It happens to be easier with blockchain right now, but who knows what the future holds in that space.
Well, and it's not really about technology for technology's sake. We didn't
Right.
build something for the sake of saying we have something with blockchain. It's about the value that our customers and our users are getting out of that. And it happened, the technology is a means to an end, so to speak, with the same with
And that's
machine
what
learning.
we do that with everything, even with machine learning. Every time we go through this agile process of figuring out what are the proper use cases that we should apply machine learning to, one of the first questions we ask is machine learning the right thing to apply to this?
Right.
Is it provide a differential approach or solution to a problem that some other solution couldn't just as equally provide? And that's one of our first questions we ask. And so that way we know that when we deliver, what we are applying machine learning to is going to provide real business value. We're not going
So
to
it's not
implement
just
something that
spraying
we
it across.
Right.
and you know there have been many use cases that we've talked about over the last
Every
few
idea
years
is a good idea.
around machine learning.
Until you
And
beat it down.
some of them made the light of day, others did not. And the reason for that is because machine learning wasn't the right solution at that time,
Yeah.
right? It may be that later on, as we get more usage, we learn more about how we're implementing this stuff, how our customers use it, that we find a different approach that makes machine learning, we revisit that question. But you know, at the very core, you have to make sure there is value that is being delivered from those investments.
I've had the
I
privilege
think,
of...
1 second, I think Ali needs to leave.
I was going to say, I hate to leave this
Wait.
audience, but I
Well,
actually
sorry,
have to
we-
go talk to our
But thank
customers
you
about machine learning
about-
and people
yes,
experience.
real business
so
value, so go create some
customers
business
first,
value.
I will say that.
And thank you for joining our conversation.
Well,
And
thank you guys very much, and hope you have a great rest of your rising,
Absolutely.
and hopefully streaming live here as well. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And then, and sorry, now back to
No,
you.
I was gonna close on one thing. I've had the privilege of doing HR transformations for over 20 years, and 10 years ago when we started doing them with Workday, over a decade ago, I was there at the very beginning. And the question that our clients were asking were some of their very simple, rudimentary questions, like, how many people do I have, right, in my organization? They didn't have even one system. Now, a decade later, right, the questions are, what skills will I need for my workforce in the future, right? What are my gaps? Much more sophisticated question. The work is changing, the talent is changing, like it's a two-sided equation. And that, I think, is the power of if HR can make the turn now, right? It's a question of, will HR change its own service delivery model to adopt the technology?
Well, it sounds like it has to be kind of an intentional and strategic change versus a go with the flow and see what happens.
Very deliberate. Focus on, and again, it sounds very easy to do, but how is your business changing? What are the business priorities? And how does your HR strategy link to them? So you're not just rolling out tools, rolling out programs, you're actually linking to real business change. So HR wants to sit at that table, but to do so, they need to understand the work, and they need to deliver on that real value to the organization.
Absolutely.
I'd add one thing, which is on the skills aspect of this. If HR is going to be driven off of a skill-based economy, then you have to have a good inventory of your skills to begin with.
Yes.
And that, what we've
You
seen...
need insight into your bank account?
That's
What's the balance?
You don't know how much money you have, how do you know how much you can spend?
That's right.
Right? So that, not to plug Workday here, but, that is one of the core things of how we have approached machine learning from a skills perspective, is we didn't start with machine learning. We started by first establishing that foundational set of skills that we could apply those algorithms to.
That's right.
If you don't have those skills in place and you're trying to apply machine learning on top of an unstructured, canonicalized set of data, you're going to get mixed results.
So good, the data, the quality of the data that goes into it is critical in not just machine learning, but in driving the outcomes of that to actually have accuracy.
Yep.
Any other key takeaways on the credential side? Our HR people forging ahead into the future with all of this change swirling around them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been said a couple times in a couple different ways in this conversation, but it's really starting to imagine and codify, what are the skills and what do they mean to my organization? And not just how can I bring them in via credentials, but also how can I produce them, right?
Yes.
What are the meaningful signals that I want to put out and give to my employees via credentials that will enable those new types of experiences going forward?
Interesting, and then that ties back into that, what are you going to do for me?
Yeah.
From an
Right.
employee
Absolutely.
perspective.
I mean, HR organizations, that if you're watching this, really think about the service delivery model and the capabilities, how you take advantage of what's possible now, but how you have to change, right? The organization and the skill sets within HR to do that, and link that up with the needs of the business. How to think about yourselves as a connected enterprise, not just as finance, HR, or supply chain, right? Think about it end to end. And don't start from scratch. Don't start from a blank sheet of paper. A lot of good work is being done in terms of what are the roles, where should HR services be delivered, how to use leading edge technologies. Start with a powered enterprise approach around stand on the shoulders of someone who's done it before you, right? And so you can go further.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that, I think it's going to be fun. Thank you to all of our listeners who joined today, our watchers. Thank you for
Thank you,
our
Katie.
panel.
Thanks,
It's
guys.
been fun having this conversation, and it's such a luxury to kind of take a little bit of step back from the chaos of rising to have to go deep a little bit into the topic. So
For sure.
appreciate your attendance today, and everyone have a great work day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back. I'm Elizabeth Houston, and I lead the social media team here at Workday. And I'm here with Jacqueline Green today, Director of Opportunity On-Ramps. Welcome. Thanks
so
for
much.
joining.
Glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you are making the time. We really wanted to dive into Opportunity On-Ramps and understand what the program offers, what's here at Workday Rising, and then for those that are watching, we will have some other panelists in just a few minutes. But first, I really want to dive in a little bit more about the program, and let's just dive right in right now.
Yeah.
So at this point, I wanted to understand a little bit more about all the great activities and ways that we can share our culture with all of our participants. So can you share a little bit of background about Opportunity On-Ramps at Workday?
Yes, absolutely. So we're hearing a ton, and we continue to hear about the fact that we're at near full employment here in the U.S. Our numbers last month, actually in September, were 3.5% unemployment in the U.S. workforce. And while that number is certainly something for us to celebrate, we recognize that it doesn't really tell the whole story. So when you're digging back the layers and looking at the number of job seekers that are actually ready to go into the workforce, or that could be in the workforce right now, but are facing barriers, whether that's to access to thriving wage careers, to full-time employment, or to full-term employment, right? So thinking about jobs that are utilizing full skills and capabilities. And so thinking through this lens, while also knowing that employers like us here at Workday are still really eager and seeking and needing to seek new ways and new avenues of pipeline talent. So we started Opportunity On-Ramps.
I was going to ask you.
As a movement to help close the opportunity gap. So thinking about ways in which we can be bringing talent from diverse backgrounds into our organization. In 2014, we started partnering with an organization, Year Up, a nonprofit that serves opportunity youth, so young adults ages 18 to 24, who have tremendous potential, but haven't had the same access to whether that's four-year college degrees or to opportunity. So we've been hiring interns through the Year Up program since 2014.
Wow.
Which has been a phenomenal way for us to be increasing diversity. It's a 6-month internship program. In 2016, we started a partnership to expand our career opportunities for veterans that we call our Career Accelerator Program, or CAP. And through CAP, we are helping to ease the transition for veterans as they're coming into the workforce.
Right.
And our CAP program has been awesome. It's been really fantastic to see veterans joining us across a variety of different roles, so certainly not one-stop shop here within Workday. And then last fall, we launched our returnship program. And so that is in support of parents and caregivers that have made a decision to leave the workforce in a caregiving capacity, and then as they're looking to re-enter, being experienced hire professionals, so folks with tremendous level of experience, but they're facing barriers to re-entry due to the large gaps on their resumes.
It's wonderful to see so many different facets of the program, and really being able to offer something that's custom almost in a sense to these different sectors that are trying to come in back into the workforce or do different things, for sure. So what does it actually take to create a program like this? It's such a large program now, and it has so many different parts to it and different types of job seekers and all those things. So how do you start a program like this? How do you get buy-in? What are the components that we should be thinking about?
So I would say tone from the top is definitely huge, right? So it's when we talk about our Opportunity On-Ramps programs, I believe we're talking about Workday as a whole. These are aligned with our culture within our organization. It's aligned with our values. And I am so blown away each and every day by the number of hiring managers that express an interest in bringing on these programs. There's definitely a lot of intentionality in terms of the type of roles in which we're seeking to place these job seekers in. And also the type of mentoring and support that we're able to provide for our job seekers coming in.
We know it's not that easy,
It's not, and we understand that. And for our people leaders and for our workmates as well, this is also a tremendous opportunity for them to be able to give back in a different way and to lean into career progression into mentoring in a way that they might not have otherwise done so with job seekers from traditional backgrounds.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's that whole opportunity to foster a real deep culture where you're almost in lockstep helping each other along the way. It makes for a much more positive environment and much more supportive all around for everyone in the organization, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about how to create one. Now let's shift the focus a bit. So what elements should we be thinking about at the onset of planning for this
Yes.
to even set the foundation for a really successful program that's also long-standing?
Absolutely. So the identification of roles, as I mentioned, is really important. So figuring out what type of roles have various entry points that we believe are going to set our job seekers up for the most success. Through our Year Up program, through our CAP program, through our returnship program, we're hiring virtually across all organizations within Workday and across levels too, which is great. But being really intentional that we're identifying those roles that we know can provide mentoring and support of folks on the front end. And then also really making sure that we have the programmatic support set up to support these job seekers. So what that looks like, and we'll have the opportunity to hear from some of our program alum here shortly, but it's being really intentional about assigning alumni mentors, formalizing the mentoring program. And we've all benefited from mentors. I certainly have in my life, and making sure that we have folks that may have had a similar journey getting to Workday as these job seekers, and whether or not they came formally through an opportunity on REM's program or not. We definitely have a really diverse set of workmates here, and so making sure that we're matching and being able to really be intentional about that. And then, truthfully, I really feel like so much of the success of these programs fall to our job seekers. We've had 80% of our program participants that have come through our Opportunity on Ramps programs convert to full-time.
80%?
Yes. So it's
wow, did everybody catch that? That's a lot.
It's a really awesome, and we're super proud of that, Elizabeth, but we also know that this isn't something that's done because of a program run. No. It's done based on the merit and the skills and the capabilities of these job seekers that are joining us.
It's definitely the relationship of the two together, right? They have to be really interested and also feel comfortable to really dive into the roles, but then also, like you said, from the team's perspective, really embracing them, giving them those opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
I've definitely seen where your team has been very proactive when there are opportunities, or even seeking out from all the organizations. Are there upcoming opportunities?
Yes.
Can we consider, these different job seekers for the roles, and really finding ways to ensure that we keep that top of mind?
Yeah.
I think it's a really important element too, if I may say so.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, before I bring in our panelists, one last question for you. What would you say are the best practices that we should keep in mind? You've mentioned a few things that I think are really important, but are there any other things that as other organizations are thinking about implementing, or potentially you have implemented but are looking for some new tips? What are those best practices?
Yeah, I think what constantly is a reminder to me is that this shift in thinking needs to start before hiring happens, right? So we need to be shifting our thoughts to the type of resumes that we're reviewing and our recruiting practices. So starting even with the recruiters that are taking a look at resumes. I mentioned with our returnship program, gaps on resumes, right? Or even understanding the value that a veteran job seeker may be able to bring to an organization. And that takes a cultural shift in a lot of ways. So thinking on the front end of that, of the hiring process, when a hiring manager opens a requisition, for example, having the conversation between the recruiter and the hiring manager to understand what are truly the skills and capabilities needed. If a bachelor degree is not necessarily required, which in a lot of roles it's not, and unfortunately not 100%, but in a lot of roles it's not, is it possible to swap that out for years of experience?
Absolutely, because a lot of those years of experience actually may, in the end, be more valuable in certain roles, because you can't necessarily always teach experience. That's something that has to come in sometimes.
Right, absolutely. So I think just starting that mind shift on the front end, and then as I shared, really identifying those entry points within our organization where we feel that we are needing skills and capabilities of this type of talent, and also making sure that we have the right teams and the right energy and support to make sure that we're setting these job seekers up for success as well.
And I think that's a really key point too, that I think that it has to be ingrained in the culture altogether.
Absolutely.
So that they are nurtured through the process. They're already going through a lot just trying to get in the doors, but also making sure for that long-term success that they're always really supported in all those different ways. Yeah.
And there are a number of great nonprofit organizations that are working in support of job seekers that are facing barriers to employment, focused on workforce development, which is what the Opportunity On-Ramps movement is all about.
That's right.
So understanding too in local communities, what nonprofits are helping to serve these job seekers, and how we, as corporations, companies, even thinking about non-traditional community colleges and ways in which we can partner with these organizations too, to help bring all the power together when we're looking to really drive a movement and impact change.
Absolutely. Well, right before I go, just one last thing. We are going to be highlighting lots of different things that are happening, obviously, here at Workday Rising. Specifically for Opportunity On-Ramps here at the conference, can you tell us a little bit of what folks that are watching will be able to see through our social channels that we'll highlight, of course?
Yes, so we have local job seekers here that are going to be joining us on site tomorrow and Thursday in partnership with Year Up, as well as the Veterans Business Initiative. We'll have veterans on site, Opportunity Youth, and we'll have our conference attendees be able to do mock interviews here, which is going to be super exciting. A great way to be able to give back right here at Rising. We also have resumes from local job seekers that are asking for advice, and doesn't take a recruiter to be able to give this expertise. Anyone, we're really excited to be able to have their input. And then a way in which all of our customer community can get involved. I'd love to share, yesterday it was announced, so at 2017 Rising, an idea was sparked by our customers around our partnership with Year Up, and the question, what if we trained Year Up students on the Workday platform and enabled them to then go on to customer companies as HRIS analysts and interns. Wow. And so we took that idea back in 2017 and just announced that we will be launching our first cohort of Workday trained Year Up students to be placed at our customer companies in the Bay Area this January. So we have tons of information on our opportunityonramps.org website.
Okay.
We're starting in the Bay Area. We're very interested to hear about companies that are interested in joining us and placing interns for this January cycle. And then once we get the pilot off the ground, we'll be looking at other U.S. cities where our customers are also hiring.
What a great opportunity. We will make sure these important websites and other resources are shared with our virtual audience. Well, great. I don't want to take up any more time. Let's get these panelists up here, and I'm going to scoot out.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So nice to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for sharing the story. All right, come on up, everybody.
Thanks for joining me here. So pleased to have you, Chris, as an alumni from our returnship program.
It's very nice to be here.
And Wayne, graduate of our CAP program, Career Accelerator program for veterans, as well as Tino from the Year Up program. So really, really glad to have you and to spend some time just learning a little bit about your experience coming to Workday and all that you've done since you've joined. Tino, I'd love to start with you. Just share a little bit about your journey coming here to Workday through the Year Up program.
Yeah, my journey started before the Year Up program actually started. I was bouncing from living with friends throughout high school, and at one point I lived with my cousin who was going through the Year Up program himself, and he told me all about it, how he was learning how to take apart computers, how he was making a career out of it, how the program was training him and paying him like real money to go to get trained for free. Or I guess not for free because he was paying him. And he was getting college credits while he was there. And I was just absolutely shocked because I was doing that for free in my personal time, creating computers for games, learning about networking, learning about system administration. So I was like, hey, if I can make a career out of this, I might as well look into this program if it's real. I can't believe somebody would pay to train a student and get college credits and place them at an internship. So I applied immediately, and from there on, I just had a lot of success.
That's awesome. And what did you study in the Europe program?
Yeah, so in the Europe program, they offer many different tracks for students to choose from information security to quality assurance to product management and IT. I chose quality assurance myself, and I actually was intern in a quality assurance role, and I'm still in a quality assurance role today.
Yeah, and it's been 5 years?
Yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks, Tino. How about you, Wayne?
So for me, my job search, I just to give you a little background on myself,
Yeah.
27 years in the Air Force. Decided one day I was spending way too much time away from my family and needed to find a way to spend more time with them. So that meant retiring from the military. And what I thought, I had a great career. I'd been in many positions, so I thought I had a great resume. The work environment at the time was, the unemployment rate's down. I thought it was a great time to make that move. And what I found out was, while I'd had all this experience and had what I felt was a great resume, it didn't translate very well to the jobs I was applying for. That most of those I didn't get, interviews for, or even a call back in a lot of instances. But then I found out about Workday and the Career Accelerator program through a friend who was, intimately understood my situation, and it's been awesome. It was a great opportunity for me to show the skills that I bring to the table and show that even though, my resume might not be traditional for the position that I'm in, I bring a lot of skills and a lot of, insight that's non-traditional in nature but provides diversity to my office, that it seems like from their comments and their feedback it's very well, received, and it's really helped the organization. So it's been great. And I've been with Workday now since February and love it and love the opportunity.
So awesome. I would love to just hear a little bit more about your 17 years of experience.
Right.
Give some flavor to what you were doing. And
right. So I started out in aircraft maintenance, and I did that for 7 years, and then I was in recruiting for 17 years, and then the last 4 or 5 years of my service, I was on a joint force working with both Army and Air, and I was a liaison to the state of Utah for military support. I also worked with our state partnership country in Morocco, doing a lot of training development and work with them. And so, so with that, I had experience both working at the state level, at the national level on councils, and working programs, and internationally working with both government and military agencies.
And your role now?
And my role now, I'm a business analyst with the payroll department here at Workday. It's actually with financial people operations, so it's payroll, expense, account compliance, corporate credit card, and stock admin. Working as a project, working small projects with them, and a little business analyst.
And you were a huge part of us launching our Career Accelerator.
Yeah, so that was a great chance for me to kind of pay it back, pay it forward. I was in the first cohort of veterans to go through the CAP program in Salt Lake.
Yep.
And it was so well received both by the veteran community and by the community of managers there in Salt Lake that we were able to do an off-cycle cohort of all right there in Salt Lake. And a lot of the individuals I know personally, I was able to reach out to my community of friends and contacts and help pay that opportunity forward.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome.
Awesome.
So,
very cool. And speaking of paving the way for other job seekers, Chris, you were the first to join us in our returnship program, part of the first cohort. Tell us a little bit about your journey to Workday.
Mine started with more of a push. It was actually my husband who said to me one day, hey, if you're going to go back to work, you better start looking because you're almost 50. That's not very nice. I know what you're thinking, and it's true. But he was right because I had taken a career break to raise my family. But my children, they were getting older now. So my oldest, Daniel, was a senior in high school at the time. My daughter, Alex, was a rising junior, and I had Sophie. She was no longer my baby. Well, she was my baby, but she was no longer a baby. She was going to be a middle schooler. So they are very, very active children, super busy, but their demand on me had started to lessen. So I started to notice I had a little more time on my hands, and of course, going back to work had always been in the plans. But that little push from my husband, knowing that, you know, the big 5-0 was coming, it might be hard to find a job now, but after that, it was going to be, you know, a lot harder. So I did have a background in IT. I joined an IT consultancy straight out of university, and I worked there for 10 years. But that was a long time ago. So when I left, PricewaterhouseCoopers was the consultancy I worked for. When I left, you know, the office was pretty structured.
Yeah.
Men were still wearing suits and ties to work every day, and women, they were wearing skirts. You know, there were no trousers in the office. So, and the phone that I brought to work, it was my phone, and I used it to make phone calls.
Right.
And that was it, right? So I had every intention of going back to work. I always did, but you know, good intentions don't really get me to the gym during the week, and I needed that push. But I was wondering, what did the workplace look like now? Things must have changed a lot since I left.
And so you came to us through the returnship program.
Yeah, so, I mean, my resume was, you know, out of date. It had huge gaps in it, and I was wondering, so, you know, there's a lot of capable people out there with amazing resumes, new graduates. Why would a hiring manager take a chance on someone like me with all of those other candidates out there? And that is exactly where the returnship program came in. So the returnship program, an amazing program. It basically allowed me to update my skills, update my resume, gave me the opportunity to reestablish myself in the workplace and get that confidence that I needed to succeed. It's been amazing, and yes, thank you. I was part of the first official returnship cohort. I'm very proud of that, and I'm looking forward to helping other people because I see what an amazing pool of talent that all of the returnships are bringing.
Yeah. Well, you all have paved the way for other Europe and CAP returnship opportunity on RIMS program participants to come through, and certainly without overcoming some really significant barriers on this journey. We have a number of folks watching us that may be thinking about the value that starting one of these opportunity on ramps programs could bring to their organization. So we'd just love to hear from you, your thoughts. What value do you feel like job seekers like yourselves are bringing?
Yeah, I think that there's a bond that's created between the organization and the employees in the workforce, because when a company takes a chance on people that come from a different pipeline, it kind of gives those employees a value and a reason to be there, and they excel in their job, and then that in turn benefits the customers, it benefits the company, and there's just this awesome bond where the company is happy because they're getting a great product, they're getting happy customers, and the employees are extremely happy because their company values them and values things that matter to them. And I think it's just awesome all around.
That's great. And Wayne, do you have any advice to give?
Yeah, and a lot of it's from feedback that I've received, and just having been in the military for 27 years, there's a huge value that a veteran brings to your organization. Number one, they've lived a life of organization and understanding a higher purpose than themselves. They work hard, they work well as teams. I know a lot of times trying to break down stigmas and ideas about a group is what it's all about, and so I hate to use generalizations, but veterans as a large part are hardworking, they're team oriented, we really look for that higher cause in life, and as a member of your organization, anytime you look at a non-traditional pool of candidates, you're going to bring diversity to your organization, right? Both in your traditional diversity sets, but also just diversity of thought, of experience, of opportunities that individual's had that they can bring. And a lot of times the things that I'm doing that I get commented for are just me asking a question, because I don't really know, I don't have the traditional background for the position I'm in, so I'm asking that question, and it makes others question, why are we doing it that way? Is there a better way to do it? And I think that while yes, the military, we're told what to do, we're given orders, but the part that sometimes you don't see is that while you're given that order, you're expected to be able to do it and find the best way possible, and devise your plan, put it together, provide it to your leadership. They vet it. It's just like corporate America, but that instilling that idea that it's okay to question is something that's very strong in the military.
Well, I want to thank you all again for sharing your journeys to Workday, your experience. Certainly, you've added a tremendous amount of value to our organization, to Opportunity on Ramps. We're so fortunate I feel fortunate to be able to work with you each every day. So thanks for joining me in this conversation. And that's all. That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thanks.
everyone. This segment of today at #WDayRising, we're coming to you with the topic organizational agility. I'm Katie Masters. Welcome. I want to introduce my two guests here. I'll first start with my workmate, Greg Thomas, over there. Say hello,
everyone.
Greg. Hello. And then I also have Ed Miller here, the Managing Director, Accenture.
Hi.
Yes. So we're going to dig into organizational agility, but I'm going to attempt to set the stage for our conversation. So we hear about digital transformation, driving growth in an organization. What does that really mean? So we've been talking about it a lot in our ongoing monthly LinkedIn Live. So if you've caught any of those, you've definitely heard our experts weigh in. But we really want to talk about the true meaning of it, of what the potential effort towards transformation is. It's driving that organizational agility. So that's what we're really talking about and teeing it up. And the exciting news is that we have some research that we've done recently. So I'll have Greg share the latest on some research we have. We'll share the link. And then if you would love to share your expert insights and perspectives with us along the way, we can't wait to hear.
Absolutely.
So with that, Greg, what is this research that we're sharing this week?
Thank you for having me here.
Yes.
So what we did is we really wanted to understand what are the behaviors that people are adopting who are more successfully driving successful digital transformations. And we went into this with the thought that digital transformation is not a one and done, that if you're really going to be successful as you move into new digital initiatives, and perhaps especially if you're interested in net new digital products and revenues, that this is really a set of behaviors that you need to adopt and a new way of working. So we surveyed just under 1,000 people worldwide back in May and June of this year across the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan.
So it's global.
It is global. I'm forgetting someone.
Just to be sure.
Germany. And about an even split between large enterprise and medium enterprise and across 9 different industries to really get a sense of what we're doing. And sort of at a high level, what we found is those who are adopting these behaviors are more successful. People who are adopting these behaviors, especially those who are adopting all 5 of them, and we'll get into those later, I'm sure.
Yes.
That they see far more of their revenue coming from net new digital streams over the next 3 years than those who have not adopted all these behaviors. But even among the entire sample set, 50% of the folks that we talked to said that they see half of their revenue coming from digital streams within the next 3 years, which is pretty astonishing.
Yeah. Okay, so knowing the research, I would love for you to weigh in, Ed, on what organizational agility means to you, because when I think organizational agility, I think hurry, quick, move on, reprioritize. What does it mean to you?
I mean, to me, you're spot on in that there's just digital disruption no matter which way you look. Whether it's coming through new consumer trends, whether it's coming through new technology innovations, through new regulations, or new nimble agile entrants into the marketplace. And organizational agility is really about organizations' ability to anticipate, sense, and respond to market disruptions, and in a way that not only delights the customer, but also drives value and differentiates compared to the customer.
Got it. So one of the key things I find interesting is that transformation is huge. We all need to be agile to drive growth, to survive, so there's no disruption. The stat that I want to just call out was interesting, is that only 15% of the survey sample have been able to fully unlock this agility. So what are the barriers then if only 15% have hit this nirvana of agility? What's limiting everybody else?
Yeah, and I'll share what we found in the research, and then I'm sure you've got a perspective. So yes, 15% are what we call the leaders in the survey, which means that they've adopted all 5 of these behaviors. And then we had 30% who adopted 4 out of the 5, but the vast majority, 55%, have adopted 3 or fewer of these behaviors. And the barriers that we saw, no big surprise, the top one across the board, across regions and industries, is sort of a combination of cybersecurity risk and compliance. That's not terribly surprising. But right behind that is constraints imposed by legacy IT. We can't get the systems to do what we want. And then, interestingly, a risk-averse mindset. We know we need to make these changes, but we're just not quite sure how to do it. And then, even for those who are ready, difficulty in scaling those initiatives. You know, we're starting, we have pilot projects, maybe we're doing it in pockets, maybe we're doing it within individual businesses, but we don't know how to cross that chasm to get it to real revenue scale.
And that's very similar to a lot of research that Accenture is putting out. We just released a new study titled Future Systems that seems like very similar trends. I had an old CIO client of mine once tell his team that new technology plus old organization equals expensive old organization. And so you don't see a shortage of investment in technology, but you do see a shortage in terms of capturing the value that our customers and clients around the world put in their business cases. And it's all about how do you think about the systems for the future versus trying to have a system that's focused on the old organizational structures of the organizations of the 20th century.
Interesting. So is it lots of big bet or fewer big bets or lots of small bets to quickly move?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a little bit of both. The point on technology adoption, I think technology adoption is where a lot of clients stop, and that's unfortunately the wrong mistake. It's getting a customer live on a new technology and then saying, okay, we're good. But it's all about how do you take that technology and penetrate it across the organization. And from there, how do you make it more of a future living system that's adaptable, that's responsive, and that's very human-centric, so the technology grows and changes with the organization.
Love that. So Greg, in the research, were there specific industries leading the way in this transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So in terms of the industries that had the highest share of leaders, media and higher education led the pack. Media perhaps not overly surprising, given that we know it's a very data-driven industry, lots of technology, and perhaps even the lines between what is a technology company and what is a media company are blurring. Hospitality came in right behind that, and then sort of at the other end of the spectrum, professional services and retail were the ones where we saw the fewest shares of leaders and perhaps have a little bit more work to do.
Does that surprise you at all?
No, it does not actually.
Okay.
Again, referencing the Accenture study, very very similar industry breakout where we see our communications tech clients leading the way, more so than other industries.
And the research, as we mentioned, is global. So was there a region that's leading the way?
Yeah, that was kind of fascinating to me personally. And you know, we saw, broadly speaking, similarities across regions, but France led the way. As the country that has the highest share of leaders across the survey, followed by Australia and Germany. And at the other end of the spectrum, Canada, Spain, and Japan. And even within those, we saw slightly different barriers from country to country, but those ones I mentioned a couple minutes ago largely held across the entire world.
Okay. So as we all move to this agile organization, what has to be in place, or what are the behaviors that are most impactful in driving agility in an organization? So.
I mean, I'm happy to start on that one. In terms of what we found in our survey, and I'd love to sort of hear your perspective from Accenture. So we looked at really 5 behaviors. We looked at what we called responsiveness, which is the notion of active and continuous planning, being ready for change, being able to adjust your execution to match your strategy based on whatever conditions are happening in the world. Adaptable, so fluid organization structures and sort of business processes following people so that when you have new initiatives, you can put the right folks in the right place and they get the work done. Skills, measuring skills, having the right skills, huge emphasis among the C-suite that we surveyed to really look beyond just hard skills, traditional technical skills, into a set of soft skills. We looked at the notion of data-driven decision-making, which is a combination of making sure folks have access to the data, but also critically are empowered to make decisions. You mentioned things close to the customer, so whatever that close point of action is, whether that's literally customer-facing or just more distributed way, so being empowered to make those decisions. And then lastly, being in control, so having the right measurement and governance frameworks so that as you distribute all this stuff throughout your organization, as you want to move faster, that as a senior management team, you have the confidence that things are happening as they're meant to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And from Accenture research, we typically say there's 7 core values of truly agile organizations, and I'll see if I can remember them off the top of my head.
Pressure.
I brought no notes.
No pressure. I don't have any notes with me. but it's all about that collaboration that you talked about. It's putting the customer at the center of what you're doing. It's putting human design at the center as well. But then there's some other behaviors that we see, like continuous learning. So organizations, again, knowing that the speed of change continues to accelerate. What you learned last year might not be relevant next year, might not be relevant next month. So how do you instill continuous learning into the organization? Empowerment. So how do you empower the worker across all levels? And the definition of the workforce is obviously rapidly changing as well, where it's often not just within the four walls of an organization, but you have your broader ecosystem, you have your network of suppliers, you have your contractors that make up your future workforce. Then there's also that kind of that DNA of creativity and innovation. And then I think last but not least is just that level of transparency across the organization where people know what's going on. They also have the empowerment and the willingness to take risk, and they have that leadership sponsorship to back them up.
And I think on that last point, one of the other findings was that those who are succeeding and sort of self-reporting that they're succeeding, they really emphasize that notion of it's okay to fail, right? That we want to try things, we want to place bets, we want to learn from them quickly, and that if they succeed, great, how do we scale them? And if we don't, let's reallocate the people and the money to something that is working.
Fail fast.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, we hear that a lot, that feel fast. So do you think that organizations need a startup mentality to be agile? Should they be thinking, like Levi shared in our innovation keynote today, that 126 years plus of that startup mentality to the DNA of a company?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a bit of the term we use is a bit of a wise pivot. So
Okay.
it's very difficult to take a Fortune 500 company and say, go act like a startup. There's policies, there's processes, there's the culture that we talked about, and saying go do startup things. That's a big journey.
Yeah.
But how do you create some of those agile principles and put in that mindset where you're starting to take some of those bets out there, where you're pivoting off of your core, you're not letting go of it, but you're entering into new channels and new markets and new solutions. So you're creating those different offerings for new or different customer bases without necessarily letting go of the core of your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So to us, it's more about that pivot versus saying go be a startup.
And I say from the research, what we saw was that a lot of what people have done to date relative to digital transformation has been in pockets. It's either been within a business unit, it's been sort of out at the edges, and to follow on to that is how do you bring some of those behaviors in? So not necessarily acting like a startup perhaps in all dimensions, but bringing some of that mentality around how do we take things and move more quickly and empower people to make decisions and learn from our mistakes in a way that feels perhaps more like a startup.
Yeah.
Without necessarily,
It ends
everything
up
that comes with a
naturally
startup.
occurring. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why inclusion and diversity is such a strategic imperative for organizations now, because you're bringing in the different mindsets from across the globe and different cultures and perspectives. Because if you don't have that, you're often moving slower than the marketplace. So that's why we see really up from the C-suite sponsorship, inclusion and diversity as one of the top strategic imperatives.
Yeah, and we've heard a bit about machine learning, a lot about machine learning at Rising so far this week, and I'm sure we'll hear more. And even from the perspective of designing algorithms, if you don't have the right representation around the table, then there's the possibility of unintended bias in your algorithms, and then things not doing what you had intended.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking of machine learning, the role of emerging technology in driving agility within a business, what are your perspectives there?
I think it's critically important. So again, referencing the Future Systems survey that Accenture just released. Sorry, it's like
We'll share that
it's
in
like
the
hot off the
comments.
press, so I'm super excited about it.
We're excited too.
We did a similar study where we looked at leaders versus laggards, and leaders were far more likely to invest in innovation. And when you think about things like machine learning or some of the newer IT concepts like DevOps, 98% of leaders in the survey were investing heavily in those technologies and those ways of working. And the laggards, kind of the bottom quartile, I think it was only like 30% of those organizations. And the survey basically said that the organizations that were in the top 10%, they were achieving annual revenue growth 5% higher than the laggards. So there's definitely business implications behind it. as we think about Agile, something like it's kind of this weird symbiotic relationship where you're investing in technology like machine learning to move away from being tied down to systems and processes. So organizations are seeing that as like
You need more for less?
more for less. So it's almost like you're spending less time on your systems, but you're investing in the right technologies.
Yeah, you're removing those steps that are
exactly
easy to remove. Yeah. Interesting.
And I think to go back to something you said earlier, the notion of people, process, and technology, right? Like how do we put the right technologies in place so that people can do their jobs, and then have that framework or set of principles so that people are adopting it and moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a different mindset when you think about how organizations consume systems now, where it used to be like, let's get this system live, and everyone goes back to their day jobs. And our organizations look at getting a system live as really the starting point to then go drive innovation and really start to consume that value that was promised in the business case.
Yeah, with all the innovation too, you become more of a strategic role, anyone's role within an organization. So where does it begin? Where does the organizational agility to begin? Is it C-suite? Are there certain functions that are leading the way in those leading companies in either of the reports?
Yeah, it's interesting. We found, we asked people in the survey, which business function do you think is most responsible for driving these kinds of digital transformation or agility type initiatives, and somewhat unsurprisingly, across the board, folks said IT. We think IT needs to be the critical business function that's helping us get there. But what we saw was within that leader group, they identified finance actually as the group that has the most impact in driving it forward. And if you think about it in terms of finance being that strategic partner and helping to bring not just the money that you need to help do something, but really charting that business strategy, I think that seems to make sense.
Yeah, I think it's, Agile is very much a corporate buzzword right now, and I think it'd be very hard for organizations at the C-suite to say, we're going to go be Agile now. It's been a term that's been around
Just
for...
turn the switch.
Exactly.
Flip the switch, yes.
It's been around for 20 plus years in IT, and I think a lot of the organizations we work with, you see it in pockets of the IT organization where they're running a certain program using Scout Agile or any of the different kind of Agile methods, and that's kind of a good starting point of it. It typically starts in IT. And then, like you said, it kind of expands to a business partner quite often, as you said, finance. We also see it kind of more and more now on the HR side as organizations see talent as kind of the catalyst to drive change. But then to be really that truly agile organization, you've got to have that kind of top C-suite sponsorship to push out that culture that we talked about in the organization.
So, again, back to speed, agility. To me, it's like, okay, everything needs to be quick, and now to flip the switch. So it seems like it could get out of hand quickly, in a way, if there isn't some sort of control in place. How can organizations focus or keep that control in a fast-moving environment of just more tech? Buy this, buy now.
I think it goes back to like continuous planning. I think we can all appreciate when we start out a new fiscal year, and we're and kind of in the old way of thinking, it's like these are my goals for the year. Yes. And by the time you get to like the end of quarter one or quarter two, you like look back at what you were doing back in like January, and you're like, this makes no sense whatsoever. So I think it's getting more into that mindset of continuous planning and sometimes things like zero-based budgeting. I think it's also to the point of failing fast. It's knowing when to pull the plug or say this is not the right initiative for us, and to basically say we understand we've spent money here, we know it's not the right path forward, we're going to get to that point of pivoting, going to a new direction, and having that the confidence and the support to make sure that happens, and not thinking about the failures, but focusing on what matters most to the organization going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's also visibility, right? Into what's happening, and empowering employees to make those fail fast movements based on that strategy, right?
Yep.
Well, and yes, and to pivot off the planning notion, we found that just under 1 in 5 of the folks in the survey said that they feel like they really have the planning process in place to react to the market with the agility and the speed that they want to. So 1 in 5. 3 in 5 of leaders said that they feel like they do. So there's clearly still room for improvement there. But again, it's indicative that those who are doing these things are being more successful in the marketplace.
Yeah. So what are the risks of organizations not becoming agile or transforming themselves to moving faster?
Where to start?
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, again, referencing the Accenture research, that looking at those organizations that weren't leaders in future systems, we found the laggards who weren't thinking with that agile mindset and future systems. They're at risk of 46%, leaving 46% of their revenues off the table 5 years from now, which is super scary to think about. And again, going back to like how quickly this world's changing, if you're not thinking about agile and how to respond to changing consumer trends, evolving market demands, you certainly run that risk. So we found agile being the way that most of our organizations are thinking about how do you stay focused and ahead of the market so you're ready to respond when it starts to come your way.
I think I don't think they have a choice. Right? I mean, one of the things that we thought about as we put this research into the market was, digital transformation as a topic has been around for quite a while now, but people haven't really cracked the nut on it, right? And whether it's for the things we talked about earlier, they're doing it in pockets, or they're doing it in particular business units or functions, or whether it's change management or whatever it is, it almost doesn't matter. It has to happen. It's a C-suite imperative. It's a board imperative. How are we going to drive more digital revenue? And to go back to a bit of your point, as I said earlier, we found 50% of the survey said we expect more than half of our revenues to be digital in 3 years' time. But of the leader group, 82% said that they expect their revenue to be digital, half of their revenue to be digital in 3 years' time. And so that's 30 points is a pretty huge delta.
Yeah.
And so if you're not doing this, someone's going to pass you.
Yeah.
And you're just going to be left behind.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. So we absolutely will share this research with all of our audience here, our followers, as well as yours that you've been sharing as well. But I'd love to know what your takeaways or what you could tell our audience as they embark, or maybe even have a little bit of that fear and anxiety that it's going to be more faster pace. What do you want to leave the audience with about organizational agility?
Yeah, I think it's using the word transformation. It's very much a transformation or an evolution, and thinking about, to Greg's point, where do you start?
Yeah.
Think about a place in your organization that is ripe to evolve and willing to take risk and kind of has that right level of sponsorship. Again, it's not necessarily the C-suite level sponsorship, but having that business sponsorship, whether it's in finance, IT, supply chain, whatever it might be, to start to push that journey forward, and realize that there's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way, but as they look back over quarters or years, they'll see the evolution they've made, and they're staying pace with the marketplace. So starting small is the best advice I can give.
Great advice. I like that.
Yeah, I'll throw in 4 things from our research.
Four
Key takeaways. The research, as you mentioned, is on our website at workday.com/agility. So we found 4 things that we think people really should be thinking about. One is to unshackle their innovators and their planners, right? To really figure out how are you going to do this, find the right folks, build the teams, do the stuff. Take the whole business with you, which is don't do this in pockets. Make sure that everybody understands from the C-suite, from the bottom up, that we really want to move in this more agile way. Measure everything. If you can't measure it, you can't know if it's succeeding. If it's digital, you can measure it, so that's fantastic. And then to pack something that I said earlier, collaboration is critical. You have to have all the aspects of your organization working together to do this if you're going to be successful.
I love that. It's collaboration. Great. Well, wonderful. Well, I so appreciate your time in joining me today for our organizational agility chat at Workday Rising. We have a great lineup coming up the rest of the afternoon, so thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katie.
And we will share that research with all of you. everyone. We are back. Next topic from Workday Rising. Hi, I'm joined by Liz Jennings, my workmate. Liz, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Katie.
Yes. Well, if you've been tuning into our previous chats over the past few months, you may have seen Liz join us for lots of different topics: organizational agility, employee experience. So today, here at Rising, I would love to have us dig into why we're always talking about employee experience, number one, but also the excitement around people experience here.
Yes.
So big announcements.
Oh
today.
my goodness, this has
so
been
exciting.
Oh my, this has been a really exciting day for us. I mean, obviously, you know, this is something we've been very vocal about. I think everybody's vocal about this in the space. That's really awesome, right? Organizations are really taking the time to understand their people and how they can provide an exceptional experience. So yeah, I think this is the time, right?
Yes.
The time for this is now. We need to understand our people, how and where they want to work, and how we can really support them, and what are those technologies that are out there that are going to do just that.
Yeah. So I thought we could have some fun with this discussion. A lot of people have been viewing for a couple hours with us, which is wonderful. So let's have some fun with a little bit of throwback.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's talk about what the employee experience used to be.
So it's a good question. How far back are we throwing it?
Oh, throw it as far back. Just have fun.
So, I mean, I think, you know, in the onset of organizations, when HR first came about, the employee experience was not really something organizations, I think, really thought about. Particularly, it was a little bit more, you know, we have business objectives and we know we need people in order to achieve those, but they aren't necessarily like required, right? Like, we don't have to focus in. We're really seeing this kind of change in the consumer world, and we talked about that last time, and it's really causing us to up our game on the business side. So we're seeing this massive investment. Not only that, you know, we've got tighter talent markets, we've got higher competitive pressures, and we're finding that if you can engage your people, your organization stands to perform better than organizations that don't.
Yeah.
So it becomes a game of profitability. So we're really starting to see that now becomes that time, and you know, we've kind of throughout the years been looking at this, and I think where consumer technology is, the predictive analytics we have out there, we're really able to figure out exactly what that experience could and should be.
I mean, I don't even know what it would have been like if I didn't have productivity tools.
Oh yeah, no,
Where
we
you
don't
had a
want to
cell
think about that.
phone
No,
or a mobile
no
phone,
way.
just
Alexa, forget about it.
just for emergency calls, not for
No, yeah,
our phone
right.
at home. So now we've got everything under the sun. So
Absolutely.
it's really, all of these tools are about productivity, right? And really trying to make an employee's work life similar to home life.
Absolutely.
Really blurring that line, because we're people at home and people at work. So
100%.
let's create that experience where we want to be at work.
Yes,
we
well,
do.
when we know we have to be at work.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we want those moments to be as impactful as possible, but also how do we give people the technology to make them more productive, right? I think we're finding that people would rather waste their money than waste their time.
Yes.
And so it becomes so critical. And okay, if I'm in the train on the way home from work, it'd be really great if I could do some business things from my phone, right? I want to be able to have this really mobile lifestyle that follows me into work and out of work, and it's just, if I need to tap into something for work and it's maybe outside of traditional time frames, that's fine, but definitely, like, how do we start to really
it's
change the game there?
instantaneously too.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're curious about something, you got your phone, take it out of your pocket, look it up, it's there, boom.
Exactly.
It's instant gratification, the world that we live in,
Yes.
you know, everything at your fingertips, but also that customized experience too, making it personal so that there's a connection to that technology.
Absolutely.
It's critical. So, you know, let's talk about what makes that personal touch or, you know, happier employee in the employee experience.
Well, you know, it's so funny because I don't know if you heard this morning, we announced as well, we've got some new functionality coming to our solution, and it's really all around, you know, completing the employee experience. For a long time, we've been all thinking about, okay, what are the different touch points and technology people are going to use, but there's this whole other arm that we really haven't, here at Workday, we haven't really talked much about, but we're going to start getting a lot more loud about it, and that is that human touch.
Yeah.
And part of an experience being personalized is not necessarily, oh, you know, the solution understands you, which is critical, right, in order to be able to make it a solution sticky and something you want to use. But there's also this element of, in the moments where I need additional help or assistance, how easy is it for me to access that help? And how, when I get a hold of that piece of help or that person, how personalized is that help? And that's something where I think, you know, we're really positioned, but really thinking about that's where this world of personalized employee experience is really moving, making it accessible anywhere. So from the devices, the mobility, the places I want to be, but also at those critical moments or in my everyday to day, it's very hyper-personalized.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but in my daily life, whether it's work or home, it's very self-service. If I want to find something, not only is it instant, hopefully, but it's also that I can find the answers without having to talk to anyone.
And I mean,
which is, you know, me, my personality of like, how can I figure it out myself?
Yes, and that, I mean, that's pretty much our entire personal lives right now, right?
Yeah.
I love the example of, you know, banking is a really interesting, that's become a very self-service driven industry. When we think about, you know, back when I was younger, right, and I had a checking account in college, I think I had like one of the first
Here's
like
a
debit
throwback.
cards. Throwing it way back here. But no, I mean, like if I got a check or if I was, you know, given cash and I needed to put it in the bank, I'd have to walk in and a teller would put it in or would cash that check.
Oh.
Right? I know, it's crazy. But then now think about the world we're in now. Everything is self-service. And when you go into your banking apps, there's all these bots that are helping make things faster, right? You may not know how to deposit the check via your banking application, but they've got, it's right there. You don't have to think about it. You can just ask the bot. Or even in this world of, you know, thinking about that next step and what the help really looks like is, you know, unfortunately sometimes we have fraud on our credit cards.
Yep.
It used to be you would find out because you would see all these transactions on a printed statement, right? They would say, oh, you had all these bad transactions. You got to call your bank and haggle with them and say, no, I was not in Cuba for 72 hours. It just didn't happen. And then you had to fight. And then eventually, you know, the card was reissued and everything is good. Now, the technology has taken it so far that banks know, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see fraudulent charges, they shut down your card, they reissue you a new one. So by the time you've identified that, a new card's probably already shown up in the mail.
Yeah.
And that is a great example of where self-service and customer service and really service and experience kind of come together. And that's, you know, I think critically that's how employees now want to be thought about, is that their world is becoming, you know, we will predict what's going on, and not only that, in the moments where you need additional help, it's right there right when you need it.
And there are benefits, huge benefits to that. Think about your love now for your credit card company, because it just does it that fast. You're like, oh, you got my back.
Exactly.
But what is the benefit from an employee experience? So that was customer, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, employees are our competitive advantage. We've heard this many times, that that's the intellectual property, that's the intelligence that really lives and breathes in your organization.
Yeah.
And keeping them at an optimal pace is what they want and what your business needs. And so how can you really think about enabling them? And so exactly the same way, right? You want your people to love you and adore you as an organization, and they're going to do that when they feel like you've got their back.
Yeah.
You have questions, we have answers. You need more help, here's assistance.
Yeah.
We're going to try to do this quicker, faster, more efficient.
Yeah, definitely shortening time so they can get back to their day jobs.
Exactly. Or
home.
Innovation.
Or home. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
So let's talk about engaging experience too. So we create an experience where it's easy for employees to go to and it's personalized, but how do we drive that engagement? What excites people to engage in something?
Well, you know what? It's interesting because I think there's always some sort of igniting moment.
Yeah.
Right? And whether it be I have to do something or I'm interested, right? I mean, it could be something as simple as I attended a trade show and I had a conversation with somebody and their career sounded really cool. How do I maybe move into that career? Maybe is there a way I can do that in my organization? So at that moment, it's an inflection point for the employee and for the business. And what is available there for the employee to go in and be more, you know, find the information they're looking for, get the guidance becomes really crucial. And so that becomes an opportunity for an engaging experience.
Yeah.
So it's all about, you know, how can you really foster the engagement and the communication loop, right? How do you make it easy for people to communicate back to the organization how they feel, what's going on, how you can improve, all of that good stuff.
One way I'm seeing too, being in a more social media marketing role, video. The excitement for video, YouTube, of course.
Yes.
Short snippets, sound bites, you know, snackable content. So is video playing a role in the employee experience now too?
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, right? You have to have when things about the content and the growing learning, right? There's a whole concept of employees want to grow their skills, they want to learn more. Well, you need to be investing right, in the content that's going to help them do that, but you really do want to make sure it is that, like you said, snackable, easy, in the
and then
moment
it's
of need.
Video at home,
yes.
Video at work. That's
So
how I want to consume my content.
It all has to be a very video-first approach. And I would even say, breaking down, it's really the communication methods, right? Thinking about how do you make it free form, and video is just such more of a personal way than, say, reading a 3-page paper or, listening to it as a podcast, which can be just as engaging, but really that moment of video does give a level of connection that we haven't seen in any other media.
And if you could give an example of like personalization then too. So, what are you seeing that's just this impactful element of the employee experience? Have you seen anything as a good example of personalization?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Workday is doing a really great job with that with our people experience, obviously.
Well, of course.
But I think, just really taking it back to the consumer world and the way that we, as humans outside of work, think about the engaging experiences, the applications. It's all about, when I go into Netflix, right, it's not going to recommend to me what it's recommending to my children, otherwise I would probably never go back in. But it knows me, and it knows that I'm tired and I really probably just want to watch Real Housewives or Marie Kondo. Like, it knows that that's probably more suited for me. And so it's all around, there's a vast array of content out there. Right? I mean, you could get lost in YouTube, really, seriously. Yeah. But how can we start to really narrow it down to what actually interests me? So thinking not just about that video, but that content, the tasks, the recommendations, how can those for our employees be so predictive that someone says, oh, that's great. The system knows me and it realizes exactly what would be captivating for me.
I mean, customization, personalization is everywhere, so it should be no different for the employee. I was reading on the plane to Workday Rising, Fast Company magazine.
Oh,
feeling very smart. And there was a little article on a new handbag brand that is creating a custom experience where you can determine inside your bag what technology you want to use. Is it a light in your bag or some other technology? Because productivity. I need to go right to the bottom of the bag to find that hairbrush.
Or my keys.
Yes, whatever it is. You don't want to be lost at you need to have your keys right away. So it's that interesting, even personalization of the tech inside a handbag, which is fascinating to me.
So fascinating.
It really is everywhere, and it should be in your work life as well. So
Absolutely.
I love that. So also, there are new standards then in the employee experience, or to bring this experience to life rather. So what has to be in place for this employee experience
to work?
Yeah.
Well, I think, from a very high philosophical, the organization has to have that mindset.
Yeah.
That growth mindset.
Yes.
The mindset of, we believe that we should unearth and unlock everything for our people. I think it starts there.
Yeah.
Next, it becomes around the technologies that you leverage. Are they easy to use? Are they intuitive? Do they help people actually get something done? Are you sitting down alongside your people and watching them use the technology and the software and saying, okay, how do you solve this problem that you're trying to solve? And if it's really challenging for them to show you, it's absolutely challenging for the masses to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think a big piece of it is you need the technologies that are easy and simple to use, and then if you're looking at the technologies, look under the covers. What's causing the personalization or customization? Is it somebody in HR or a business systems role configuring that?
Yeah.
Or is it being driven by things like machine learning or AI that can actually take that vast amount of data and the optionality and curate an experience that's very personalized to each and every individual user?
All with the employee at the center, even with natural language, so
Absolutely.
that it's easy to use, because I'll search something completely different than anyone else here.
Exactly, and I think we're just now at a really exciting point in technology, right? Where we have these technologies, and I don't know if you've read Prediction Machines, the book. It's so fascinating. I love that book. But what he really talks about is, once you get machine learning to be cheap, which is not bad the way of cheap, but it becomes proliferated and everybody can leverage it. It gets infused everywhere, and then we all start to absorb it and love it and can't live without it. And that's exactly right. The natural language processing, being able to say, okay, here, of all the ways and terms that you could describe something, this means the same thing. So therefore, when someone asks for this, they really want this, and therefore give them that. So,
again, productivity. That's how we save time as well. Search the way they would search.
Yes.
We would search.
Yes.
I love it. So where do organizations start on creating this employee experience?
Everybody's going to have their own journey, and I think that's totally normal. Industries are different. The business challenges are different. I always say it's hard in this sort of an arena because it feels like it's very Me Too, right? Like, oh, what are you doing? I should do the same thing. Or, oh, that's a great idea. We should do the same thing. And you're kind of in this mode of like, it should be this, or otherwise it's not right. But what I really think is look at your organization, listen to your people. They are very vocal. They will typically tell you exactly what's on their mind and the kind of experiences they're looking for.
Uh-huh.
So I always say start with your people, start with your metrics. What are things happening? What's happening with your business systems? What are they telling you is working and not working?
Yeah.
And then start creating the experience around that. And then as well, try to infuse your culture whenever possible, because people are really looking for that bigger purpose to anchor onto. And so if you've got that kind of at the heart of that, our culture for an organization, say, is all around collaboration and connectivity.
Yeah.
Think about how you can infuse that into your employee experience.
I love that. Well, thank you for joining me.
Oh, my
I'm
pleasure. I
so
just love
glad
this.
to have you. And thank you all for tuning in. We've got an afternoon lineup that continues, so stay with us. Grab a water, and we'll get to our next topic shortly.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in as we're spotlighting some of the main themes here at Workday Rising. Again, I'm Elizabeth Houston, Director of Social Media here for Workday, and I'm joined right now with Eric Hansen, the Director of Sustainability, and as well with Nikki Eagle. And she's really around the events and all the different things that have to do with giving back, right? So these are all very important parts, as well as many of the other topics we've talked today about employee experiences and really creating a rich culture. So I'm really excited to dive into some of these areas with both of you, so thank you for making the time. I'd like to start out first to understand a little bit more from the sustainability side of the house, really teach me about this. So when we think about the environment and kind of where we are today, we keep hearing the buzzwords about, wanting to really create a positive environment and help, and we hear about all the scary things that are out there with global warming and all. But in your experience, what have you seen as the biggest shift here from kind of where it started, especially with the role that you have, and now? And then we'll get into some areas. Is it just about the recycling bins, or is it more than that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think historically it has been about the recycling bins. So it's been about, where do we put our waste as a company in our offices? And it's been very sort of low-key and more employee-centric. And I think that the transition that we've seen, certainly over the last 5 years since I've been at this role formally at the company, and even over the 9 years that I've been at Workday, within the industry, you're starting to see a movement towards more strategic alignment with your sustainability objectives and your business objectives.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
For example, for Workday, a lot of what we'll get into in this discussion is around what we're offering our customers. So it's not just the recycling bins and the break rooms, but it's a strategic alignment with the products and services that we provide and environmental sustainability, and those two can be held together and go hand in hand, really.
So would you say then, is it a best practice that we think about it holistically, not just from the certain perspectives of recycling paper, but really thinking as a whole?
Exactly, right? You look at your value chain and your operations as a company and say, what are my environmental impacts throughout that chain? So our offices, our data centers, our business travel, our employee commute, our user conferences. What are those impacts on the environment and on people? And how do we mitigate those negative impacts? How do we ramp up and accelerate the positive impacts? And really it goes hand in hand with the type of business that we want to operate. It's not just the right thing to do, but we know that our customers are asking us for this, and so we're delivering that to them.
Right, and I suppose it really makes a big impact in the employee experience as well, being able to contribute. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that study after study shows that the employees that are in the workforce right now care about the environment. They care about environmental sustainability. And it's not just millennials, it's all the way up to the baby boomers and all the way down. But certainly millennials and Gen Z are very, very passionate about climate change and about the environment. And we want to provide a workplace where we value their input and their passions, and align our operations with environmental sustainability, because that's how you, as an organization, compete with talent, certainly in Silicon Valley and beyond. You're all trying to scramble and find those talented individuals, and if they happen to share a passion around environmental sustainability, then we should really be listening to them and making sure that our operations are sustainable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So before we get into more of these areas, I'm very curious, can you help me understand some of the terms a little bit better?
Yeah.
So I hear carbon neutral cloud a lot, and I also hear beyond carbon.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more so I can understand the differences?
Yeah, so we offer all of our customers globally, all 2,800 plus, with a carbon neutral cloud.
Okay.
And what does that mean?
Yes,
right?
what does that mean?
So what that means is that we can look at the carbon footprint, the carbon emissions, across the life cycle of us providing our products to our applications to our customers. So the electricity in our data centers, the cooling in our data centers, the electricity and energy within our office spaces, and we can become climate neutral, or carbon neutral, by procuring high quality renewable electricity for our data centers, for our offices, and also reduce our energy usage as much as possible. That's really step one.
Yeah.
Then it's procurement of renewable electricity. And then lastly, it's buying high quality carbon offsets to offset those emissions that you just can't reduce. And so we look at the totality of those emissions across those data centers and offices, and we draw a line there and say, well, we're going to address all of those emissions to the extent that they're completely carbon neutral through offsets, renewable electricity, and reductions. And that's where we've achieved that since FY17, so the last couple of years, fiscal years. We offer all of our customers a carbon neutral cloud.
Okay.
And beyond carbon, what we mean by that is that we look for carbon offsets that go beyond just the carbon emission reductions. So we allocate what they call carbon finance. So we invest in those offset projects that have a social impact or a well-being impact, or a philanthropic impact that goes beyond just those emissions. And so I'll give you an example. Here at Rising, we are offsetting all of the emissions for all attendees, more than 13,000 attendees here. We can calculate the round trip in an airplane to go from their hometown to Rising and back, and we can procure high quality carbon offsets to offset those emissions. And the particular project that we're choosing to partner with here is called EcoFiltro. It's a water project in Guatemala where not everyone has access to potable water that's free of pathogens. Typically what ends up happening is you boil that water in order to remove any pathogens that might get you sick, either to cook with or to drink with. And so what EcoFiltro does is they offer a carbon filter that's gravity fed in a sort of looks like a pot. We have it on display out here in Rising.
We'll have to get a picture of that and show it to all the folks online.
And what they end up doing is, you can provide those water filters and then people don't have to boil water. And we know how much carbon is emitted when you have to use fuel wood to boil that water. We can calculate that and buy the requisite number of offsets. And then EcoFiltro can go bring those water filters to disadvantaged communities that don't have access to clean water.
Wow.
So it's really a win-win for people, for the environment, for health and the well-being of disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, it sounds like the more we help each other, the more we're really going to be able to handle all that's happening with the environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all connected.
It's all connected. That is so true. So thank you for explaining that. Now I feel much clearer on it. So I guess now I want to understand a little bit more about how can organizations that are listening in today create bigger, better impacts when it comes to sustainability, and also rallying your employees to really embrace that type of culture that finds that to be important.
Yeah. So I think any organization where they need to start is they need to look at their value chain. What sort of company am I? Am I a tech company? Am I a cloud-based tech company? Am I manufacturing goods? Am I manufacturing, jeans or clothing, right? So your footprint when you make a tangible object versus a cloud company like Workday is going to look radically different.
Sure.
So depending on your industry, you might be more focused on chemicals or water or agriculture. For us, we're really focused on carbon emissions and electricity because we have people in data center or people in offices writing code and deploying that code in data centers, and that's really our footprint for the most part. So I tend to tell other organizations, other sustainability folks who are just starting out, look at your industry, see where your biggest environmental impacts are, and really focus there. And for most companies, that's really going to be your carbon footprint, and it's really going to be your energy usage.
That's really good advice. Yeah. For companies that are out there that are already doing this, of course, we're seeing lots of great examples, but certainly more of these companies should be looking at even more ways
Absolutely.
To do it.
We're all in this together.
Exactly. All the creative ideas, for sure. Now, with that, because we want to create more impact, also comes some potential risk, some things that, not even risk, but cautionary things that we should be thinking about as we embark on this so that we do it the right way and we don't actually go against the whole idea of sustainability. Are there any things that we should, keep in mind that we, as other organizations, are kind of going through this?
Yeah. Well, I'd say, look to what other peer organizations in your industry are doing, what the leaders are doing. I think that's a great place to start. Typically, you can learn from what they've embarked upon. There are sort of industry protocols, if you will, that you can look towards as frameworks for where to start and begin. As an example, we helped develop something called the Corporate Cloud and Co-location Buyers Principles, which is essentially a group of tech companies that came together and said, we really need to make the data center industry greener. And so we put a framework together, a set of 6 principles that any company can grab and go to their data center provider and say, hey, I really want you to focus on these areas, better data quality, renewable energy procurement, higher efficiency in those data centers in terms of energy usage, et cetera. So you really build sort of a culture. So that advocacy, I think, is really a good starting point. And if you don't start there, then you're going to tend to try to reinvent the wheel. And for most organizations, you want to look at what the leaders are doing so you don't sort of focus on the wrong areas that are maybe not as material for your company or your industry.
That makes a lot of sense. In your viewpoint, have you seen more of those types of resources coming out of organizations now that are trying to achieve that kind of level of sustainability?
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are just more, just resources or case studies and things like that out there to be able to learn from?
Yeah, as the example I brought up, the co-location principles are one. We just were involved in a case study that was released around how to do aggregate renewable energy procurement. So what that means for the layman is, unless you're one of the largest companies in the world, it's really hard for you to go out and buy renewable energy from a wind farm or a solar farm that's going to yet to be constructed, that's brand new, what they call additional. And so what we did is we partnered with 4 other corporates and did a really smaller scale version of that procurement. And it hadn't been done to date. And we said, you know what, we should probably put out a case study to help others bring them along so that they can do the same thing. And so we just published a case study through the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance. And it just it walks you through the business case, the lessons learned, how to set this up legally, how to go about doing this to sort of remove some of the risk that's inherent in these large-scale transactions. So if you're interested and you're out there and you want to procure renewable energy, but you're a smaller company, take a look at the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance.
Yeah.
We've just put that case study out, and I think it's a good blueprint to get more renewable energy out in this world.
Yeah, that sounds like a great resource. And we'll definitely share that link as well after this as well. All right, before we round out and start talking about giving back, I do want to understand, what do metrics, how do you measure this? What are the types of metrics that are important when organizations are thinking about sustainability, and what does it look like in terms of improvement? What can employees look at and say, yes, I made impact?
Yeah. I think as an organization, there's an alphabet soup of different sort of metrics that are out there, right? Organizing bodies that
and
say,
it might be
do
also
this or
different
that.
Organizations maybe have certain things that are more important to them, right?
Absolutely. Back to your industry and your company, what's more material for you, right? So for us, it's carbon and energy, and so there are well-known frameworks that are out there that provide ways for you to calculate and obtain those metrics. So your greenhouse gas footprint, there's a greenhouse gas protocol that's put out by WRI. There's RE100, which we're members of, companies that have a commitment to 100% renewable electricity. They provide a white paper and a framework for how to do your metrics, for how to measure your renewable electricity. So whatever your metric is, figure out what key area of impact that you want to achieve, and go look to those external bodies that have published white papers that are generally NGOs that have agreed upon frameworks for how to measure and calculate that, and look to those. There are ones for water, energy, carbon, whatever it may be, waste, etc. Start there so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
I think that sounds like sage advice for sure. All right, before we round out here, tell us a little bit about what attendees that are on site and also those that are watching virtually can see. We'll add to social, of course, some spotlights of what you're showing here. You talked a little bit about it earlier from sustainability standpoint.
Yeah, so number one, we are offsetting all travel round trip for all attendees. You know, it's really in alignment with us offering our customers a carbon neutral cloud. So we're really proud of that. And we actually have a display out in the expo floor of one of these EcoFiltro filters, which is fantastic. We also sort of have some information about how we offer and achieve a carbon neutral cloud out there on the expo floor. And then what we're trying to do is engage with attendees and say, you know, this is how we're protecting the planet. How are you protecting the planet in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I have a button that we put out here. We have 4 different buttons. If you're a climate hero, if we are a nature nurturer, if you're an energy maven, or if you're a water steward, and you take the button or buttons that are most meaningful for you, and we're asking people to put those on your lanyard and have a conversation with other folks about what you're doing to protect the planet.
There's a ton of networking going on here, so I'm
Yes.
sure a lot of information exchanges. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your guidance here, and hopefully we're getting some great tips out there to folks as well. You know, just as we switch over, one thing that comes to mind is just making impact and getting people motivated. So when we think about giving back is another really important element that I think touches us at a very raw human level. And I think it's sustainability too, as we see everything happening with Earth and what do future generations come to, you know, experience themselves. So switching gears just a little bit, from an employee experience, can you tell us a little bit more about giving back and what it actually means to the organization? Why is this an important element to the employee experience?
Of course, happy to, yeah. So giving back is really not a new concept at all. Employees, people have been giving back in their communities from the beginning. But when an employer offers programming or ideas or ways that employees can give back in their communities together with their coworkers, it's really a very special experience, and one that is not only beneficial to the employer, because employees who give back are getting an opportunity to sharpen their skills, to gain new experiences, to grow empathy, to grow their emotional intelligence, all of these really critical leadership skills when they give back, but they're also growing something in themselves. It's scientifically proven that when you give back, when you help someone else, you are healthier and happier. And as a best place to work, we know that happy employees equal better business. They're more motivated, they're more engaged, they build better products and have better customer service. And so creating a really innovative program that helps employees give back in their communities or the things that they're passionate about with their coworkers is really beneficial for everyone involved.
Are you finding that there are certain teams or you know, parts of the organization that are more excited or prone to giving back, or do you find it is pervasive? I mean, I know it's a very strong value at Workday, so you know, I'm curious, is it an anomaly, or are we finding that organizations are really putting this, embedding it into their culture, and is this sort of, now this is the way of life?
Yeah, great question. I don't think that it's specific to any profession or industry or organization. I do feel like some companies do a much better job of making clear what's important to them.
Yeah.
And at Workday, it's our employees, and of course workforce development is important for our foundation. But really, an employee or an employer that is able to carve out time for their employees to not only signal permission, but to signal motivation, or to signal this is important to us.
That's right.
We want you to do this, and to carve out time, that's really important. And you'll see companies doing
volunteer time off with dedicated days that employees can take, much like paid time off, where they can take time off of their work to go volunteer. Or you're seeing percent time, like employees getting a percentage of their work time that they can dedicate to their passions. Or employees or employers are incentivizing employees to give back. And so employees can volunteer, log their volunteer hours, and often earn grants or earn funding for their nonprofit partner as a thank you to the employee or to the employer, to the organization.
That's funny you should say that, because I am just going through that process at Workday to get funding that Workday provides if we volunteer enough at our kids' schools. And so we're rallying all these workmates that are at the same school to do just that, which is a great win because we get to volunteer in the classroom or whatever. But then Workday also helps to support it from a financial part. So that's fantastic. And I think also one thing to keep in mind is the variety, right?
Yeah.
What's great about that?
What's great about that is in the past, some companies have been have drawn lines in the sand of this is what we're passionate about as a company and this is where our strategy lies. Therefore, this is what our employees will care about.
Yeah.
And yes, you will see some overlap there, and it's really important for a company to have their strategy and their mission and to invite their employees to be a part of it. But we also know that employees are people, that they have different passions, different motivations, different experiences. And when you can really empower those employees to get out and volunteer with whatever cause that they're passionate about, it's then where you really, as an employee, experience that internal just goodness and motivation that not only do I get to go out and do good in the community, but my employer supports me.
That's a really good point. And can we dive just one step deeper in that of there's always the company priority and what they feel passionate about, or potentially you've got executives that are really passionate about a particular area, but then employees maybe are not, as passionate about certain things, but really passionate about others. How does a company balance the two together?
Yeah, great question. It's always a balance, but what I like to say is I think we can all work together. We can bring things together in a really great way that it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can learn about new initiatives. There are so many causes out there that people don't even know about, or they're just lacking education on. So a company who has a specific priority or passion really has an opportunity to educate their employees or anyone, customers, about what it is that they care about. But also employees have that same opportunity to educate one another. That's why at Workday we do team volunteering, which I can invite my coworkers into my passions and they can invite me into theirs. And it's really fantastic. Even though I have my own passions and I have time to pursue that, I get to learn more about my coworkers and about what my company cares about, and there's a special pride in that too.
Also special bonding that you get.
Yes.
It's not just all about work, right?
Yes, certainly. That is a great benefit, to be able to get away from your computer, get away from your core work just for a few hours one day, to bond with your coworkers over something that they're passionate about or you're passionate about. If you're pulling weeds at a sustainable garden, you learn so much about your coworkers. It's really a fantastic opportunity that I think no other form of team bonding puts you in that place.
That's right.
To learn.
That's right. That's a really good point. As we round out our session today, I'm curious about the area here that you're managing. Can you tell us a little bit about what attendees here are experiencing, and of course what we're going to get for the virtual audience as well?
Yes. So here at Rising, we're focusing on workforce development. Workforce development is really our Workday and Workday Foundation's core strategy. We know people, we know creating a great workplace, so all that we can do to help people get into meaningful careers is important. So we believe that talent is everywhere and opportunity is not. And so really we're partnering with workforce development organizations in Orlando and around the world and inviting attendees to volunteer in a really hands-on way. So there's two different ways. One, we have a massive wall of over 600 resumes from real job seekers who are part of workforce development organizations.
Okay.
We're inviting attendees to grab a resume, spend 5-10 minutes reviewing the resume, providing some feedback, writing a little note of encouragement, and we'll get it back to the job seeker. It's this simple little thing that someone is able to provide that really goes a long way in helping to shape the confidence and the career story of this job seeker. And we're also inviting 2 different workforce development organizations from here in Orlando to actually come to Workday Rising as our guests. So we'll be able to introduce them to all that we have to offer, as well as have a day of career exploration and a chance to grow their networking skills, their interview skills. We're asking attendees to sign up to conduct mock interviews. So spending 45 minutes with a job seeker and helping them gain the expertise and the confidence that they need, just practicing their skills, telling their story, really goes a long way in helping them to secure that meaningful employment. But if you don't mind, I tell a quick story.
Please.
Last year at Rising, we had job seekers come on site, and we're able to introduce David to Diane. And Diane is a Workday professional. David is, or was, but job seeker who had dreams of a 4-year university but was really faced with the financial barriers and wasn't able to attend. So he joined a workforce development program to gain IT skills. And as a part of this program, we invited him to Workday Rising last year. That's where he met Diane. And Diane just instantly saw a spark in him, something that was, he had a bunch of motivation and he was hungry to learn. And so that's where they started their mentor-mentee relationship. It continued over the course of a few months. And David, though he didn't have a college degree, so he was experiencing hard times in trying to get into the interview room with a company. But once he did, he was able to reflect on Diane's encouragement and knowledge and everything that she shared, and he got the job. So now he's employed at an IT company.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it's just that little experience supporting a job seeker, providing encouragement, confidence that can make lasting impact in their career.
That is a great way to wrap up this session. Boy, thank you so much for taking the time to share sustainability and giving back. And there's so many other things that are also part of the employee experience that we're sharing through our keynotes, our other sessions, and then here on the show floor. So we'll make sure that we share all of that online. Thank you so much for your time. And for those that are with us online, please stay tuned. We have another great session coming up in just a few moments.